The night was pitch black, thick enough to swallow the world whole. Across a wasteland that seemed to have no end, a train roared forward. Its steel frame was like a metallic beast tearing through the darkness, the rhythmic clanging of wheels against the tracks sounding heavy and steady, a harsh symphony played by the nameless in the apocalypse. With every jolt, the entire carriage shuddered. Inside, I curled up in a corner on a thin, filthy mat, trying to let my body sway with the constant vibration. It helped with the nausea, like being on a ferry. The light inside was pathetic. No windows, just two dim, yellow bulbs hanging from the ceiling, too weak to even make out anyone's face clearly. The air was thick with a putrid stench, a cocktail of sweat, foot odor, waste, vomit, and other nameless horrors. It was so dense it felt worse than a dry latrine in the middle of a sweltering summer. Despite snagging a relatively clean spot in the corner, my face was pale with disgust. It had been 3 days. For nearly 3 days, I'd survived on nothing but 2 cups of muddy water and 2 slices of moldy bread. That was it. A carriage barely 3 meters wide and 10 meters long, packed with over 100 people. Everyone was so hungry their eyes were bulging. If I hadn't been sitting firmly on this pile of straw, those people would have torn it apart and eaten it long ago. They were no better than a pack of lunatics now. This was my 3rd day since transmigrating into this world, a world that had completely collapsed, where order had vanished, leaving only the rawest instinct for survival. Just then, a burly man in tattered clothes, reeking of filth, crawled over to me. His eyes were locked onto the straw mat beneath me, filled with greed. He cleared his throat. "Hey, brother. Scoot over a bit. This mat is huge. You can't use it all by yourself, right?" When I didn't answer, he licked his lips and looked back at the others. "Don't you all agree?" But in the next heartbeat, his voice cut off abruptly. I lunged from the corner, pinning the man to the floor before he could even react. I gripped the sharpened branch in my hand and drove it straight into his eye socket. 1 strike, 2, 3. By the 4th, I stopped. My stamina was low. I had to conserve it. The man thrashed violently like a slaughtered chicken. I said nothing, just stayed on top of him, my hands tightening around his throat. 10 seconds later, when his body finally went limp, I looked up. My gaze was cold and predatory as it swept across everyone in the carriage. When they all instinctively looked away, I kicked the corpse aside and sat back down on my mat. I tried to steady my breathing, refusing to show even a hint of weakness. Under the dim light, no one dared to speak. The greed that had flickered in their eyes was instantly snuffed out. One by one, they backed away, trying to keep as much distance as possible. In an instant, even in this cramped carriage, a clear, empty space formed around me. Humph. I leaned my back against the iron wall, quietly hiding the sharpened branch under the mat. If I had been a second slower, I would have been the one dead. These people weren't human anymore. They were a pack of starving ghouls driven mad by hunger. All it takes is one leader for their malice to explode out of control. No matter how good I am at fighting, I can't take on a whole crowd. This was the first time I'd ever killed someone. It felt harder than I expected, yet simpler than I thought. My heart was still racing, and my limbs were trembling slightly, but I couldn't let it show. One sign of weakness and they'd pounce like starving wolves. It wasn't just about the straw mat. It was about my body. I was much cleaner than any of them. After the man's death, the carriage fell back into silence. No one talked. No one had the energy left to speak. Conserving strength was the only smart move. But just then, the connecting door was kicked open, and blinding light flooded in from outside. 3 men with pistols tucked into their belts and batons in their hands stepped in, their faces cold. Their steel boots stomped over people without hesitation, but no one dared to cry out or show any resentment. They walked straight to me. The leader looked down at the corpse on the floor, then at me sitting on the straw mat. His voice was toneless. "You killed him." He didn't wait for an answer. He just waved his hand, and the 2 men behind him lunged. Batons rained down on me repeatedly. Every strike was delivered with full force. I could only curl into a ball in the corner, shielding my head and gritting my teeth, not making a single sound. Nearly a minute later, the beating stopped. The leader looked at me lying there, silent and uncomplaining, and a strange glint appeared in his eyes. He gave a cold smirk. "Everyone here is Call's slave. You've got guts, killing someone right under our noses." He paused. You're tough. Lucky for you, the boss has his eye on you. From now on, you're the leader of these slaves. They're all under your management. Any issues, like escaping or laziness, and you'll be held fully responsible. With that, he gestured, and his subordinates went back to the brightly lit carriage, quickly returning with a bag of pickled vegetables. They tossed 2 hot but slightly moldy buns and a bottle of mineral water onto my straw mat, right in front of everyone. Then, they dragged the corpse out through the coupling and slammed the door shut. The carriage plunged back into darkness, leaving only the steady clatter of the tracks as the train hurtled towards some unknown destination. Once they were gone, I gritted my teeth and crawled up, sitting back on my mat and leaning against the cold iron wall. I tore open the bag of pickles and slowly chewed the moldy buns. They were actually warm. They weren't exactly a delicacy, but they were warm buns and pickles, far better than the moldy bread from before. As the bun hit my tongue, my throat actually ached from how hungry I was. My body wasn't used to chewing anything solid. I twisted the cap off the water and downed half the bottle in one go. After finishing one bun, I wasn't full, but my body felt significantly better. I narrowed my eyes, staring at the door to the next carriage. When the door opened earlier, I saw that the carriage ahead wasn't just brightly lit. It had rows of seats. Over 20 henchmen were sitting there. When I was being beaten, they had turned around to watch, laughing as if it were a show. I had guessed right. Killing that burly man wasn't just self-defense. I knew that in an environment like this, the rulers always need a low-level manager, and in this carriage, that position was vacant. I needed that spot, and the carriage ahead needed me. By holding that position, I'd have access to much more information. From the moment I was forced onto this train and told we were heading to a mine, I understood. Even if I killed someone, they wouldn't kill me. Killing me meant losing 2 slaves. Keeping me meant only losing 1. In the pitch-black carriage, I could vaguely feel countless greedy eyes fixed on the steaming bun in my hand. The sound of people swallowing their spit was as loud as cicadas in summer, but no one dared to step forward. Under the intense gaze of the crowd, I took my time finishing the 2 buns and the pickles, then downed the rest of the water. I let out a long sigh. Finally, I felt somewhat full. I had really been on the verge of starving to death these past few days. Earlier, I had done my best to protect my vitals. Now, my whole body was throbbing with pain, but it didn't hinder my movement. My joints were still intact. If only I had a cigarette right now. After a full meal, you always crave a smoke. I glanced around the carriage, my back against the iron wall, remaining silent. Transmigrating so suddenly. Everything that happened over the last few days was a massive shock. I went from a society where I never worried about food to being thrown into the apocalypse. Survival had become my only concern. As for cigarettes, that was a luxury. In a place where you could starve at any moment, where would you even find one? Just then, Big Brother, a balding man, his face smeared with dirt, crept toward me. After stopping at a safe distance, he flashed a fawning smile and carefully pulled a piece of cloth from his chest. Inside were 2 slightly crumpled cigarettes. He held them out, his voice a mix of flattery and nerves. Big Brother, want a smoke? I looked down at the cigarettes on the cloth, then up at the balding man. I knew everyone in this carriage was on the brink of starvation. No one had anything left, yet he had managed to hide 2 cigarettes. If he'd been caught with them earlier, he definitely would have been robbed blind. Sure enough, I saw several other men staring at his back with murderous envy. If I refused, this bald guy's end would be miserable. He knew it too. His eyes were full of plea and unease. I paused for a moment, then took the cigarettes from his hand. I put one in my mouth and wrapped the other back in the cloth, tucking it into my pocket. Seeing this, the bald man immediately exhaled in relief. He pulled out half a box of matches and, in the dim light, carefully offered a flame. Big Brother, here's a light. Yeah. I leaned back against the iron wall, exhaled a long trail of smoke, and frowned slightly, coughing a few times. The tobacco was a bit moldy and very harsh. But in this situation, having a smoke after a meal, I had no right to be picky. I took another drag, flicked the ash onto the iron floor, and looked at the bald man. I waved him over and whispered, "From now on, you sit next to me." The moment I said it, the greedy glares directed at the bald man vanished. Yes, thank you, Big Brother. Excitement flared in his eyes. He scrambled up and carefully sat on the iron floor beside me, making sure his rear didn't even touch a corner of my straw mat. The cherry of the cigarette glowed in the dark carriage. Before long, it burned out, and I crushed the butt against the floor. After a moment, I lowered my voice. Where'd you get the smokes? I didn't understand this world yet and needed to gather information through conversation. I hadn't talked before because the others weren't worth it, but this bald guy had taken the initiative to submit. He was the first person I could actually talk to. I didn't mind people following me. In fact, I welcomed it. One man isn't enough. You need a crew to get things done. Whether he was sincere or not didn't matter. Thinking too much about that was for naive kids. The bald man glanced around and whispered, "Big brother, I used to be a deputy driver. Just on a small train, nothing like this one." After a disaster, the train was completely destroyed. I was wandering the wasteland when I was captured by this train and turned into a slave. He continued, his voice getting even lower. I had half a pack back then. I've saved them until now, and only 2 were left. He leaned in. This train has 3 slave carriages. Each has about 100 people, so nearly 300 slaves total. It's likely a level 2 train, maybe even close to level 3. We're heading to the mines now. Mining is heavy, dangerous work. People die all the time. But while we're mining, the rations are decent. Everyone gets to eat their fill. So, when we get there, big brother, do you think you could arrange a less dangerous job for me? I stayed silent for a long time, processing the information. Then I looked at this middle-aged man who was whispering in my ear while stubbornly keeping his butt off my mat. His posture was both ridiculous and respectful. I liked that. He knew his boundaries. A deputy driver, huh? Yes. Well, I've been a deputy my whole life. I was deputy class monitor in school, deputy manager at work, and when the apocalypse hit, I luckily became a deputy driver. I've never been the lead, and I don't want to be. My skills are limited, but luckily, I've always found a way to survive before and after the end of the world. I stopped talking and lowered my eyes. From my observations and what he'd revealed, this world basically had 2 types of people, captains and slaves. Every train had different levels. The higher the level, the stronger its defense and offense. For the first 3 days after I arrived, the train had stayed in the wasteland. Even though we weren't allowed to leave the carriage, I saw through the gaps in the door that the henchmen were always on high alert, as if they were afraid of something jumping out at any moment. In this world, there are almost no fixed settlements. Every hub is a train. The bigger the hub, the bigger the train. To live long enough and well enough, you have to become a captain and own your own train. A captain? I fell into thought. Lao Zhu used to be a deputy driver. He knew trains better than any other slave. He was useful. He couldn't be allowed to die. He was a valuable asset. More importantly, he had fallen from a high position to a slave without losing his mind. It was like he was born for this. The moment he saw an opening, he used his hidden treasures to cling to me for protection. A clever old fox. The carriage went quiet again, save for the sound of someone urinating in a far corner. Lao Zhu sat upright beside me, his head resting on his arms as he dozed. His eyes were full of dread for the journey ahead. In this world, you only have a basic sense of safety when the train is moving. Whether stopping in the wasteland or at the mines, the danger level spikes. At any moment, you could be swarmed by a horde of the undead. He didn't want to die. No one in this carriage wanted to die. No one ever does. But someone always has to. Through the night, the train hurtled on. I sat in the jolting carriage, my expression unreadable. The sound was no longer just wheels on tracks. It was the hull of the train grinding against the earth. I'd realized over the past few days that this train didn't run on rails. It just drove over open ground. Strange. Just then, wait. I froze. The birthmark on the back of my hand suddenly flared with heat. Instinctively, I looked down. A semi-transparent holographic panel abruptly floated before my eyes. Survival days reached. 3. Activating train captain panel. I also received a starter reward. 1 GLS pistol with 18 rounds of 9mm ammunition. The captain's trial quest was activated. Task 1. Within 3 months, possess a train of your own. Reward, unknown. Task 2. Within 3 months, acquire 3 henchmen and 10 slaves. Reward, unknown. Task 3. Within 3 months, kill 10 zombies. Reward, unknown. The faster the completion, the richer the rewards. Completing all 3 trial tasks will officially unlock the full train captain panel. The sci-fi scene before me left me stunned. The pale white glow of the panel in the dark carriage was almost blinding. I instinctively glanced around, but no one reacted. It was as if I was the only one who could see it. I stayed silent for a long time, then looked down at the mark on my hand. The heat was gone. I lightly traced it, my mind a bit blank. My name is Chun Mang, a name I gave myself. I grew up in an orphanage, no parents. I had this very specific birthmark on the back of my hand. It looked like the Chinese character for Mang, meaning vast or wild. I used to think maybe it was something my parents left behind, so I took the name. I never expected this mark that had been with me my whole life would actually do something in this world. Or maybe, my parents transmigrated here long ago and left this for me before they were forced to leave. I chuckled and shook my head, dismissing the wild thought. After a moment, I figured out how to use the panel. It appeared or disappeared based on my thoughts. Reaching into my shirt, I felt the heavy, cold weight of a bronze-colored pistol and a handful of bullets. The reward was already in my hands. But this wasn't necessarily good news. I tucked the pistol behind my waist, covering it with my shirt, and stuffed the bullets into my pocket. Only then did I let out a quiet breath. If the thugs in the front carriage found out a slave like me had this, it wouldn't end well. No matter how good a shot I was, I couldn't take on that many enforcers, especially since the train had heavy weaponry. I'd wait until we reached the mines to find a quiet spot to study it. In a daze, I felt the train run for another 4 or 5 hours. As the horizon turned the color of a fish's belly, the train slowed and finally stopped in the wasteland. A loud metallic clang echoed, followed by a thud as the door swung open. A group of thugs in steel boots, pistols at their waists and batons in hand, stood at the door shouting, "Herd the slaves out." Someone was in charge of handing out pickaxes, one for every slave, except for 3 of us, me and 2 fierce-looking guys from the other carriages. Clearly, the 3 of us were the overseers. "Line up, damn it!" A roar echoed as the frail slaves huddled together in the wasteland. I stood in front of my carriage's slave unit with the other 2 overseers. The middle-aged man standing on the roof of the main carriage was the same one who had disciplined me earlier. He was currently assigning tasks. I scanned the surroundings, breathing in the cool air. It felt much better. 3 days in that stinking carriage was enough to break anyone. I wore a thin jacket over a t-shirt and long pants. The early morning wasteland air was bone-chilling. Before me was an endless wasteland. No trees, no ruins, just desolate earth. Nearby was a mound several meters high, its sandy slope revealing the entrance to a mine. This must be the mining area. It looked crude, with safety seemingly left to fate. The middle-aged leader quickly finished the assignments. The 3 slave teams were to enter 3 different mine shafts. But first, they had to be fed. The thugs dragged out crates of moldy bread slices and muddy water. The starving slaves lined up, terrified the food would run out before it was their turn. Today, each slave got 10 slices of bread and 3 cups of water, far more than their usual rations. Before hard labor, they had to be fed. As for the 3 slave overseers, we each got 6 hot but slightly moldy buns, 2 bags of pickled cabbage, 2 bottles of spring water, and a walkie-talkie. While we were in the mine, the train and the thugs would stay at the entrance. In an emergency, they'd contact us via radio. Our job was to lead all the slaves out as fast as possible and retreat to the train. After the announcement, we were dismissed to eat before heading down. The slaves scattered, finding spots on the ground to devour their food. "Eat up." I glanced at the middle-aged man who had been following me closely and tossed him a bun and half a pack of pickles, then found a quiet corner for myself. I wasn't in a rush, slowly chewing the bun. I wasn't that hungry since last night's meal hadn't fully digested, but in the wasteland, food is life. Keeping your strength up is never a waste. I watched the other 2 slave leaders in the distance and asked casually, "Do you have a name?" "Thank you, big brother." "Thank you." The middle-aged man, who seemed quite sharp, carefully took the warm bun, his mouth full of gratitude. When I asked his name, he froze for a second, then his eyes lit up. He whispered, "Big brother, you can call me Lao Zhu." "Is your surname Lao?" Yes, it's a bit rare." I shook my head and laughed. No parent would name their kid Zhu, pig. He didn't look embarrassed at all. My family was poor. My parents wanted me to live a comfortable life like a pig. No worries about food, just waking up and eating. He started telling his story, his voice calm. His mother had a mental disability and had lost her limbs in a car accident before meeting his father. His father was deaf and mute, working as a laborer on construction sites. The whole family lived in an abandoned shipping container. Not long after he was born, his mother died in a fire while home alone. When he was 9, his father fell from a scaffold and died. He smiled faintly. Thinking back, it's better they died. If they lived to see this apocalypse, it would be even more painful. The smile on my face slowly stiffened. I said nothing, just took another bite of the bun and kept chewing with a calm expression. Lao Zhu, on the other hand, didn't seem to mind. He still had that eager smile. In the apocalypse, a name is important. Asking someone's name is, in a way, the first step toward accepting them. For example, the leader of the thugs on this train never asked my name. To him, I was just someone who could be replaced at any moment. Knowing my name was pointless. Big brother, what's your name? My name is Chun Mang. Brother Mang. The brief conversation ended, and we both fell silent, sitting cross-legged on the ground to finish eating. I was getting full, so I tucked 2 buns and a bag of pickles into my jacket for later. My pocket bulged noticeably. Soon, our time was up. Under the shouts of the thugs, the long line of slaves filed into the mine. The entrance was just a hole in the small mound, looking like an animal's den. It wasn't impressive, but the moment I stepped inside, I felt something was off. The tunnel was deep and wound downward. After walking for over 10 minutes, we reached a fork with 3 paths. As planned, I led the slaves from carriage 7 into the leftmost tunnel. The other 2 tunnels were for the other carriages. We walked straight for dozens of minutes until we reached the end. The space suddenly opened up, like stepping into a massive limestone cave about 7 or 8 meters high. On the ground were black, lumpy iron masses sticking up about a meter high, looking like deformed cauliflower. Their surfaces were covered in nodules. I narrowed my eyes, confused. This is the ore. This kind of mining was completely different from what I imagined. Wait. Lao Zhu gripped his pickaxe and whispered an explanation. After the apocalypse, supernatural changes appeared in this world, like the existence of the trains. As long as you have a train order, you can create a train out of thin air. Resource areas like mines also appeared. Mining this kind of, or doesn't require refining. You just hit the ore block with a pickaxe. An average adult can get 1 unit of iron ore per hour. This is a level 1 iron mine, the lowest kind. It's relatively safe, not like the mines you have to dig in lava. This material is the main ingredient for upgrading trains. He pointed at the pickaxe. Brother Mang, look at the info panel for this pick. I took the pickaxe and gave it a test swing. Immediately, a panel appeared before my eyes. Tool name, pickaxe. Tool level, level 1. Effect, can mine level 1 resource areas. I was still the only one who could see this panel, but according to Lao Zhu, whoever held the pickaxe could see the info. This proved the post-apocalyptic world had undergone massive supernatural restructuring, and I could accept that. I asked, what are the ways to get a train order? There are many sources. For example, killing any monster has a small chance of dropping a train order. The probability is just very low. The higher the monster's level, the higher the drop rate. So far, the monsters we see most are level 1 zombies. A single zombie isn't strong. Any adult with a sharp weapon can handle one. But usually, zombies don't come alone. They come in waves. If you don't break the encirclement before the horde forms, the train will get stuck. I've looked closely at this train's wheels. They're level 1 windfire wheels. The advantage is they're the fastest on flat terrain like the wasteland. The downside is they can't handle rough terrain and get jammed by zombie corpses easily. If we switch to level 1 caterpillar tracks, it would handle those situations much better. It's just not as fast. It's always a trade-off. Another way is the black market. Occasionally, captains gather spontaneously to trade supplies. There's a chance to buy a train order there, but slaves like us definitely don't have the right to go. For now, those are the only 2 ways I know. I see. I nodded slightly, falling silent. By now, the slaves around us had raised their pickaxes and were slamming them into the black iron blocks on the cave floor. I didn't need to push them. They were all very self-disciplined and familiar with the work. Once they had a pickaxe, they worked without laziness. Upgrading a train needs resources. Getting resources needs slaves. From this perspective, slaves were the only real force of production in this world. Their value was undeniable. Well, Brother Mang, I'm going to go dig some or two. Go ahead. Nearly 100 slaves were gathered in the cave, the atmosphere bustling. Iron pickaxes rained down, the clanging sounds merging into one. There was no dust, and the ore blocks on the ground didn't even change shape. I stood in the middle of the mine, scanning the area, then walked to a corner in the back. I started studying the captain's panel my birthmark provided. There were 3 trial tasks. Only by completing them could I unlock the other functions. The apocalypse had been going on for a while. There must be many people who had already upgraded their trains to very high levels. In this dog-eat-dog world with no order, without a safe enough train, you don't even have basic survival. Relying on others isn't a long-term plan, and I don't want to be a slave. This captain's panel was my chance to catch up to those who started earlier. Of the 3 trial tasks, the latter 2, recruiting henchmen and killing zombies, weren't too hard. Only the first condition, possessing a train of my own, was truly difficult. According to Lao Zhu, train orders aren't easy to find. I had to calculate carefully. As I thought, I pulled the GLS pistol from behind my waist to examine it. It felt heavy in my hand, its body a solid matte black. The magazine was already loaded with 9 rounds. Simultaneously, a panel appeared. Weapon name, GLS pistol. Level 1. Effect, can be loaded with level 1 ammunition. Deals effective damage to level 1 armor, monsters, and corresponding targets. I touched the brass bullets in my pocket. They also showed info, level 1 standard ammunition. Interesting, I muttered. I was starting to understand this world. After the apocalypse, it had been restructured by supernatural forces into its current state. I didn't know if pre-apocalypse guns still worked, but according to Lao Zhu, even if a normal person found a train order, it wouldn't do much. And finding one at the black market was likely very hard because everyone there was already a captain. No one would bother buying another order. Even with a train order, you need resources to upgrade. To get resources, you need slaves. To manage slaves, you need henchmen. To manage henchmen, first, you need a core team. In other words, a foundation. If I could seize all the slaves on this train, I'd have 300 slaves. Enough to start a business. But the captain of this train hasn't shown his face once. Just those thugs were more than I could handle, let alone the heavy machine guns mounted on the roof. Heavy machine guns against carbon-based life forms are absolute overkill. At least I knew I couldn't take a few hits. While I was deep in thought, Lao Zhu was sweating and swinging his pickaxe in the distance, his brow furrowed as he thought intensely. The reason Lao Zhu had bowed his head so quickly wasn't just because I was decisive and ruthless. It was because of the unwavering conviction I radiated. He'd met many people in his life. Those who could achieve greatness all shared that quality. People with strong enough conviction usually end up in one of 3 ways: success, death, or being crushed by reality. He didn't want to be a slave anymore. He wanted to gamble, which is why he approached me. Sure enough, I had quickly started asking him about train information. Normally, a slave would never care about how to own a train, nor would they dare to think about it. And this was his advantage. The other slaves didn't understand these things at all. Only he, a former deputy driver, truly understood. If I could become a captain, he would definitely be part of the core team. Then his fate would completely change. But the biggest problem was how to get me a train order. For hours into the mining, the radio in my hand suddenly crackled with a frantic scream. Everyone retreat. Retreat now. The sound was so loud it made my ears ring for a moment. Before I could react, the slaves in the mine turned pale almost simultaneously. They shoved or they just dug into their bags and ran madly back the way they came. The ore was lumpy and about the size of an egg. That was 1 unit. I'd seen a slave hit the iron block for an hour just to get 1 unit to drop. I didn't know what was happening, but seeing Lao Zhu running toward me with a panicked face, I immediately shouted and turned to sprint back. The walk-in had taken 40 minutes. The run-out took barely 10. As the gasping slaves burst out of the mine, we saw the train parked at the entrance, and in the distance, a massive black mass was surging forward like a crushing tide, a zombie horde. I looked at the scene, my heart jolting. Before, the 9-carriage train, all black with 3 heavy machine guns on the roof, felt safe. But against that endless tide, it suddenly looked pitifully small. The stench of rot had already reached us, and the ground beneath our feet began to vibrate. That was the sound of countless zombies running together. They were only a few hundred meters away. Even if I couldn't see each one clearly, the suffocating pressure was already choking me. The thugs stood at the open slave carriage doors, their faces twisted as they roared, "Hurry the hell up!" I didn't dare delay, dragging Lao Zhu towards slave carriage 7. People from the other shafts were also pouring out. Just as the last slaves scrambled in, before the doors could even close, the train lurched into motion. But the acceleration was too slow. It took dozens of seconds to reach top speed. It was too late. The encirclement had formed. The tide wasn't just coming from one direction. It was closing in from all sides. Rat-tat-tat. I sat on the straw mat in carriage 7, my face grim, listening to the heavy machine guns roaring outside. But given the size of the horde I saw before boarding, I didn't believe those machine guns could solve the problem. To break through an encirclement like this, in my opinion, you'd first need to change the wheels to the caterpillar tracks Lao Zhu mentioned, something that wouldn't get jammed by corpses. Second, the train's armor had to be thick enough. Our slave carriage was just thin iron plating. A pickaxe could punch through it, let alone the crushing pressure of a tide. I gripped the pistol in my hand, but even that didn't give me much of a sense of security. The air in the carriage was thick with suffocating tension. Some people started babbling incoherently from the mental breakdown. Others were trembling and praying to God. With no windows, we couldn't see the situation outside, but hearing the machine guns firing almost nonstop was enough to know things were bad. Brother Mang. Lao Zhu sat close to me, his face ashen, his voice trembling. When I got on the train, I saw it. The encirclement isn't absolute. There are gaps. He coughed and continued. But those gaps are made of many small openings. You have to weave through them perfectly, like a motorcycle through traffic. A train isn't that agile. Its turning radius is too large. But if the captain had installed a level 2 universal support wheel on every carriage, the maneuverability would increase significantly. That would be our only chance. He paused, a bitter smile on his face. That's not a mandatory requirement for upgrading a level 2 train to level 3. From what I know, most captains can't bring themselves to spend resources on it. If this train doesn't have level 2 universal support wheels, then this time, I'm afraid we're done for. Level 2 universal support wheels. I memorized the unfamiliar name. I stopped overthinking and pressed my back against the cold iron wall of the carriage. No one cared about the jolting anymore. No one cared about the stench. Everyone was in a state of absolute terror. Survival. That was the only thought in everyone's head. No, I can't just sit here and wait to die. I closed my eyes, running through every possibility in my mind. A moment later, I snapped my eyes open and looked at Lao Zhu. I whispered, "This train has 9 carriages. The first is the engine. Carriages 7, 8, and 9 are for slaves. You said the train isn't agile enough, right? If we find a way to get to the engine, cut the connection to the rear carriages, and let you drive. You were a deputy driver. You know how to drive, right? No, it won't work." Lao Zhu shook his head almost instantly, his face pale, his voice raspy. All trains are bound to their captain. Only the captain has the right to control it. Even if we stormed the cockpit, we couldn't take over. We definitely couldn't drive it. He paused. But Brother Mang's suggestion is good. Cutting off the rear carriages is basically like giving the front carriage a universal wheel. It would give a better chance of escape. I just hope the captain hasn't thought of that yet. We looked at each other, our expressions heavy. Clearly, if the captain had already thought of that, we would immediately become discarded pawns. Even so, I stood up, preparing to move toward carriage 6. I said grimly, "We have to get to the engine first anyway. Follow me." The next moment, before I could move, several metallic clangs echoed from outside. Then, I felt the train's speed dropping rapidly. I took a deep breath, pulled out the last crumpled cigarette Lao Zhu had given me, and stood in the middle of the chaotic carriage to light it. I exhaled a long cloud of smoke. The GLS pistol was firm in my hand. I calmly waited for the coming judgment. We were definitely going to die. We'd been abandoned. I didn't blame the captain. If I were in his position, I'd do the same. I was just disappointed he didn't even try to fight a little harder. When we were stationed at the mine, were the scouts asleep? Why did they only notice the horde after the encirclement was formed? Are resources that precious? He couldn't even bring himself to build one level 2 universal support wheel? Wasting all these slaves. Wasn't it worth one support wheel? With the cigarette in my mouth, I cocked the gun and stepped over the trembling bodies in the carriage. I reached the iron door and yanked the lever down. The door swung open, and cold wind carrying the stench of rot blasted into the carriage. Even though the carriage had lost power, it was still hurtling forward on inertia. But it wouldn't last long. The moment the door opened, the tide was almost right in front of us, just a few meters away. I couldn't see the end of it, just a nauseating stench and a dense mass of zombies with twisted faces swarming toward us. I looked at the scene and muttered, "This really isn't fair." I'd read plenty of apocalyptic novels before. Other people transmigrate and face 1 or 2 zombies. I show up and get hit with a horde this size. It's a total dead end. Who could survive this? But even if I die, I'm taking a few of them with me. Bang! The gunshot was deafening. A zombie lunging at me had its head blown open, leaving a hole the size of a bowl. Its body collapsed and was instantly trampled by those behind it, vanishing without a trace. That was the first zombie I ever killed. It wasn't because I was a good shot. I'd never used a gun before. It was because the distance was so short the barrel was practically in its mouth. At this range, anyone is a marksman. Level 1 zombies clearly aren't that tough. A pistol shot at close range is enough to explode their heads. If it were a single zombie, a grown man could handle it. Even 3 or 5 wouldn't be a problem. But you can't fight a swarm that outnumbers you like locusts. Bang! Bang! The shots rang out in succession. I was getting the hang of it. The magazine was empty in no time. I didn't know how many I'd killed. It was too chaotic. I just knew every bullet had found a home in the tide. By now, the train's speed was dropping even further. That meant my time to shoot was running out. I quickly swapped magazines and started loading the brass bullets from my pocket. Before I go, taking a few more with me makes it worth it. Just then, inside the carriage, a slave suddenly rushed forward and collapsed on his knees before me as I stood at the door. His face was white with terror, his voice trembling and choked with tears. "Big brother, can you give me a shot? I want to die quickly. I don't want to die in their mouths." "I can't." I kept loading the magazine and replied flatly, "Ammo is limited. It's more worth it to kill a few more zombies before we go." It wasn't just me. From the next carriage, rapid gunfire was still echoing. The thugs in carriage 6 had also been left behind. They were probably struggling in their final death throes right now. The man on the ground looked up at me, his face turning feral, veins bulging in his neck. He roared, "You won't even grant me this? I just want a comfortable death. Is that too much to ask? We're all..." Before he could finish, he lunged at me, clearly aiming for the pistol. But I stepped aside, and as he lost his balance, I didn't hesitate. I delivered a powerful kick. The man fell straight into the zombie tide. A blood-curdling scream tore through the air, but it was silenced almost instantly. Then, I turned to look at Lao Zhu, who was holding his pickaxe as if ready to strike. I asked casually, "You planning to move against me too?" Lao Zhu froze and explained frantically, "No, Brother Mang. I was going to take out that slave." Back in the mine, everyone had dropped their picks to run. No one bothered to bring one. I didn't know where Lao Zhu got his. Maybe he'd picked it up in carriage 7 where the thugs had left some. I chuckled, not caring. Of course I knew. I just wanted to mess with him a bit before we died. Though, clearly, the guy had no sense of humor. Besides, it was kind of funny. We're all about to die. Why bother explaining? We can talk about it downstairs. I'd finished loading another magazine and kept firing. I didn't even need to aim. As the train slowed, the nearest zombie was less than half a meter away. I could even see what it looked like. No hair, skin deathly pale, blue-purple veins showing clearly. Its pupils were absolute black. It was terrifying. Bang, bang. The shots kept coming. Hey. After emptying another magazine, I took a drag of the cigarette at the corner of my mouth and leaned against the door. While loading, I glanced at Lao Zhu and asked casually, "Any last words? Let's hear him. We haven't known each other long, but we've got a connection." "Well," Lao Zhu's face was pale with fear, but he forced a smile, trying to stay calm. "Nothing much to say. The apocalypse has been going on for over a year. I expected this end. It's not hard to accept. I just regret giving Brother Mang that cigarette earlier. I wanted one last drag before I went. I laughed and handed him the nearly finished cigarette. You really only had two? Here. I've got 9 bullets left. I'll kill a few more, then save one for each of us. That's a better way to go. Lao Zhu said nothing, his eyes brightening as he took the cigarette. He took a deep drag, his body finally relaxing. He closed his eyes amidst the swirling smoke and laughed out loud, as if a great weight had been lifted. That's the stuff. The other slaves in the carriage were mostly curled in corners, their faces full of despair, helplessly waiting for death. I even saw a few people run over to my straw mat before they died and sit down. Clearly, they wanted to feel how soft it was before the end. Since they were dying anyway, why be afraid of me? The train's speed had dropped to almost 0. It would probably stop in about 10 seconds. Quite a few zombies had already crawled under the carriage, their sharp claws scratching against the hull. Phew. I exhaled and kept firing into the mass. Bang, bang, bang. With only 3 bullets left, I felt the mark on my left hand flare with heat. With a thought, a milky white semi-transparent panel floated before me. Captain's trial task: kill 10 zombies within 3 months. Status: completed. Time taken: less than 1 day. Reward: Rare Captain's Order X1, Portable Zombie Sensory Jammer X1. Looking at the panel, I froze for a second, then realized. This was the captain's panel I'd activated last night. There were 3 trial tasks. Only by completing them could I unlock the next functions. It was so frantic I'd forgotten. I didn't expect the rewards to be this good. The Rare Captain's Order was definitely stronger than a normal one. But I didn't have time for that. The tide had surrounded the carriage. Even if you gave me a whole train right now, I couldn't break out. The wheels would jam instantly. There was no room to start. But this zombie sensory jammer was different. This could save my life. Feeling a token and a walkie-talkie-like device appear in my hand, I grabbed the device. Another panel popped up. Special item: Portable Zombie Sensory Jammer. Effect: upon activation, masks the senses of level 1 zombies toward all living beings within a very small radius. Duration: 1 hour. Cooldown: 24 hours. There was only one green button on the panel. At that moment, zombies were practically pouring into the carriage. I didn't have time to think. I slammed the green button on the device. In the next instant, all the zombies outside the carriage froze like headless flies. But just seconds later, they quickly scattered, continuing to lunge toward the carriages ahead. It wasn't just my carriage being ignored. If nothing went wrong, every carriage except the engine had probably been abandoned. Phew. I let out a long breath, my eyes flashing with the joy of surviving a disaster. Damn, I thought I was done for. To think there was a way out. I actually survived this. The jamming range seems decent. It covers the whole carriage at least. But it only works on level 1 zombies. I can only pray there are no higher level zombies in this tide. Right now, the carriage is like a small boat in a storm, liable to be crushed at any moment. Plus, the effect only lasts an hour. If the tide doesn't retreat in an hour, we're still in danger. But if we get through this, I'll not only have a rare captain's order, but nearly 100 slaves in this carriage. Maybe I really can start my own business now. I turned to look at the confused, terrified slaves in the carriage, and the corners of my mouth curled up. Fortune follows disaster. This is clearly a good thing. I just hope zombies don't eat bread or anything like that, so after the tide retreats, I can go to the other carriages and see if any food was left behind. If I can strip those heavy machine guns and mount them on my new train, even better. I remember clearly, those guns weren't on the engine. The only pity is that those guys who beat me with batons probably won't make it. Thinking back, it still hurts. This, Lao Zhu, who was gripping his pickaxe and ready to die, was stunned to see the zombies suddenly fall into confusion and scatter, ignoring our carriage. Screams from the other carriages kept coming. He glanced around and finally fixed his eyes on me. Even if he didn't understand what was happening, he knew one thing. These slaves couldn't have done it. So it had to be me. From the start, I was different from the other slaves. I didn't look despairing. I was even much cleaner. Clearly, I'd bathed recently. In the apocalypse, not everyone has that luxury. The big brother he'd chosen this time was clearly not simple. I narrowed my eyes and looked back into the carriage. The expressions on the slaves' faces varied, but mostly it was the excitement of survival mixed with lingering fear. The carriage wasn't big, yet it held nearly 100 people. If the tide really retreats, managing these slaves will be a major issue. I only have 3 bullets left. Luckily, I'd built a cold, ruthless image from the start, and they didn't know how much ammo I had left. With Lao Zhu's help, I might be able to maintain control. If things really go south, the safest bet is to throw some slaves out to the zombies while the tide is still here. If I only keep a dozen, everything stays under control. It's just that labor efficiency would drop significantly. In the apocalypse, death is common, but slave resources are rare. If I don't have to waste them, I won't. If I hadn't inherited this slave carriage from the previous captain, gathering 100 people in the wasteland wouldn't be easy. Plus, they're all men, no women or elderly. After more than 10 minutes, the tide continued to surge forward like locusts, bypassing only our carriage. When I jumped off the train and stood firmly on the wasteland, looking at the quiet, open ground, the heart that had been in my throat finally settled. For now, we're safe. Brother Mang. Lao Zhu jumped down too, pickaxe in hand. He scanned the empty wasteland, his voice tinged with helplessness. You saved us, but the engine is gone. These carriages have no power. In the middle of nowhere like this, we won't survive long in the wasteland. I shook my head and said nothing, just reached into my shirt and pulled out the rare captain's order I'd just received. It was a token, square on top and pointed at the bottom, solid black. On it were 3 bright red characters. Train Captain Order. This. Lao Zhu was about to continue when he saw the token in my hand. He froze, then looked up in shock. Where the hell did this captain's order come from? Wait, killing low-level monsters like zombies does have a tiny chance of dropping one. But when the tide retreated, he'd been watching. He didn't see anything drop. In the next moment, the ground shook violently. A train suddenly appeared in midair and slammed down onto the wasteland. But this train only had an engine, no connected carriages. It was solid black and sleek, looking less like a modern engine and more like a heavy, ancient steam locomotive, radiating a sense of weight and history. You have activated the rare captain's order and received a train of your own. As it is a rare captain's order, you receive an additional level 1 lava forge component compared to a standard order. This component can only be obtained through a rare captain's order. I looked at the panel before me. This was the standard panel of this world, though mine was a brighter white. A rare captain's order, just 1 extra lava forge? My eyes instinctively fixed on the 4 words Lava Forge, highlighted in dark red. Component name, Lava Forge. Quality, red. Component level, level 1. Effect, can devour level 1 trains, dismantling carriages and components into resource units. Upgrade condition, 100 units of level 1 iron ore. I pondered for a moment, then looked at Lao Zhu. So that means these abandoned carriages. I can dismantle their components for my own train. Lao Zhu finally snapped out of the shock of seeing an engine appear from thin air. He replied instinctively, as long as the component is intact, it can be removed and used on your train. But if it's damaged, it's useless, you just leave it behind. There's a group of people in the wasteland called scavengers. They ride motorcycles to collect usable parts from broken trains to sell. Damaged carriages and parts are usually left where they are. Monsters eat people, not iron. The wasteland is already littered with piles of scrap carriages like these. My eyes lit up, and I nodded with satisfaction. This information was perfect. From that, I could conclude 2 things. There are plenty of scrap trains in the wasteland for my engine to devour, and the rare captain's order is truly valuable. If it weren't, these scrap trains would have been processed by others with a lava forge long ago. They wouldn't be left here. Very good. I didn't rush to check the rest of the train panel. Instead, I led Lao Zhu back to slave carriage 7. Holding my pistol, I swept a cold gaze over every slave. My voice was devoid of emotion. From now on, I am the new captain. You are my first batch of slaves. I will provide food. You just keep mining as before. Only one thing. I will not tolerate any resistance. Remember that. I didn't wait for a reaction. I turned to Lao Zhu. Make everyone hand over the iron or they dug in the mine. Anyone who doesn't listen, use your pickaxe on them. Understood. Lao Zhu put on his fiercest face. Standing at the door, he roared, "Are you all deaf? Didn't you hear what Master Mang said? Immediately, weak, scattered responses came from the carriage. We heard you, Master Mang. Before it was Master Cohen, now it's Master Mang. In the wasteland, all captains are called Master. That's the unspoken rule. Lao Zhu's heart was pounding, but he had to act tough. He'd only handled internal affairs before and never went on missions. He wasn't cut out for being a thug. But with a shortage of people, he had to grit his teeth and step up. After leaving the carriage, the first thing I did was check the other carriages for resources. Those carriages definitely had stuff left. But before letting the slaves in, I had to clear out dangerous items like guns to prevent any incidents. Our carriage was number 7. The two behind it, 8 and 9, were also slave carriages. I checked them first. They were empty, with only tattered clothes and thick blood covering the floor, mixed with scattered iron or like stars in a pool of blood. The carriages were nearly destroyed, leaving only a basic frame. The steel hulls were torn with holes by the undead. These two. I'll have the slaves collect the resources later. The good stuff was in the front carriages, 2 through 6. Carriage 6 was the guard's carriage. Everyone inside was dead, but since there weren't many of them, it wasn't as bloody as 8 and 9. In the pools of blood, there were still plenty of guns, batons, ammo, magazines, and other gear. I didn't mind the mess. I just frowned, rolled up my sleeves, and started gathering everything. For now, I moved it all to my locomotive. Carriage 5 was for living supplies, piles of bread, buns, and mineral water. There were also some train components, like a level 1 water purifier, along with steamers, cooking pots, and various utensils. Carriage 4 was the warehouse, filled with ore, though not in huge quantities. Ore is counted in units. 1 stone is 1 unit. There were roughly a few hundred units here. It also stored a lot of pickaxes, axes, and other mining tools. Carriage 3 was the combat carriage. 3 heavy machine guns were mounted on the roof. Inside were 2 level 1 ammunition production lines for the machine guns and pistols, along with a pistol production line. Normally, this place should have been full of ammo, but it was empty now, save for a few stray bullets on the floor. The production lines were damaged, and 2 of the 3 heavy machine guns were broken. Carriage 2 seemed to be high-end quarters for the captain's inner circle. It had 7 single beds, and the living conditions were clearly much better than the slave carriages. Even though the carriage was trashed, there was no blood or tattered clothes. It seems when the captain abandoned Carriage 2, he took his inner circle with him. I couldn't remove the heavy machine guns from the roof by myself yet. As for the pistols and ammo, I had to make several trips to move them all into my engine. Only then did I have time to seriously examine the interior of my locomotive. The engine wasn't big, much smaller than a carriage. About 3 meters wide and 7 meters long. The engine itself took up 4 meters. The living space was tiny, even smaller than a slave carriage. At the back of the engine was a steel door. Just looking at it, I knew its defense was many times stronger than a normal armored carriage door. This door could only be opened by someone with captain's authority. Controlling the train was simple. In the cockpit, you just used your thoughts. Very sci-fi. The cockpit was about 12 square meters. The front was all glass, giving a clear view of the outside. Standing there, looking out at the wasteland through the glass, I felt an indescribable sense of satisfaction. On this dangerous wasteland, owning your own train isn't easy. There was a red button on the console labeled Train Panel. I pressed it. Immediately, a detailed panel appeared on the screen. Train name, pending. Train level, level 1. Components, level 1 lava forge. Number of carriages, none. Or units, none. Upgrade condition, must possess 4 carriages, 7 essential components built, and consume 5,000 units of level 1 iron ore. Next to it was another red button. Train members. Here, I could appoint a deputy captain and crew and set different permissions for each, like the right to use heavy machine guns. Furthermore, weapons produced by the train's production lines cannot harm the captain or deputy captain. On the train, the captain has absolute authority. There was one more red button on the console. Train components. After pressing it, the screen showed a list of components a level 1 train could build, along with the required resources. The system also clearly marked which components were mandatory for upgrading and which were optional. There were 14 types in total. The first 13 were divided into 2 groups, 7 mandatory ones in green and 6 optional ones in white. But at the very end, there was a component in dark red that could only be built by trains obtained through a rare order. This is the good stuff. I continued familiarizing myself with the cockpit functions while staring at that red component, shock flashing in my eyes. This rare order was even more overpowered than I thought. Component name, Will Swapper. Quality, red. Component level, level 1. Effect, opens a space above the wheels of each carriage to hold 2 sets of wheels, allowing free switching between 3 different sets of wheels. Upgrade condition, 100 units of iron ore. At first glance, it didn't seem like much, but it was incredibly useful. Trains have many types of wheels, each suited for a specific environment. With this, I could build 3 sets and switch freely without losing speed. I could easily adapt to any dangerous environment in the wasteland. Every component had an animation demo along with its description. For example, my train currently uses caterpillar tracks. Once the wheel swapper is activated, a set of rail wheels is pushed out from the side. When they lock onto the ground, the tracks are retracted. The entire process is incredibly fast, barely affecting speed. Normally, to change wheels, you'd have to stop the train completely and have mechanics do it manually. It takes a lot of time, and in the wasteland, you often don't have that luxury. Next, I glanced through the other 13 components I could build. I took a deep breath and decided to tally all the ore first to see exactly how much I had. I'd need to build a warehouse carriage first to use as a temporary slave carriage for the crew. Then I'd use the lava forge to devour the damaged carriages. Thinking about it, it felt a bit like the game Snake. Just then, I felt the mark on my hand flare with heat. Another trial task was completed, though it only showed up after I'd finished studying the cockpit functions. I didn't think much of it, just leaned out of the engine door to look at the slave carriage nearby. Seeing no major commotion, I felt at ease to keep tinkering. Nearly 100 slaves, that's no small number. To put it bluntly, even if it were 100 pigs rushing you, you'd be dead with just a small pistol, let alone a group of people who've survived the apocalypse. But I wasn't too short on ammo now. I'd gathered quite a bit from the scrap carriages. I looked down at the mark on my hand, and the panel appeared. Captain's Trial Task 1. Within 3 months, possess a train of your own. Status, completed. Time taken, less than 1 day. Reward, Dragon Slaying Assault Rifle Production Line Blueprint X1. Looking at the reward, I couldn't help but smirk. An assault rifle is a fully automatic weapon. Its power, range, suppression, and accuracy far exceed a small pistol. Plus, according to train rules, weapons produced on the train can't harm the captain or deputy. Because of that, I could feel safer giving weapons to the guards. The prerequisite was that the production line had to be built by the captain himself. Lines stripped from other trains didn't have this rule. Of course, I could bypass the rules. It's not like I couldn't use weapons from this line to harm the deputy. And as for the deputy position, I already had someone in mind. Blueprint name, Dragon Slaying Assault Rifle Production Line. Blueprint quality, green. On the console, besides the train panel, members, and components, there was another button, Train Rules. After pressing it, a series of basic rules appeared on the screen to guide a survivor into becoming a true captain. It included a detailed explanation of component qualities. Qualities from low to high: white, green, yellow, blue, purple, gold, red. The lowest is white. For example, among the 14 components a level 1 train can build, 6 are white, fairly common. The higher the quality, the rarer the component. The other 7 are green. To upgrade to level 2, you must build all 7. They are essential components. Those 7 are water purifier, rail wheels, wind fire wheels, carriage steel armor, electrical system, power generator, and pickaxe/axe production lines. Ore is also graded: level 1, level 2, even level 3. Different levels of ore are used for building and upgrading components at different levels. All the ore mentioned here is level 1. These 7 green components are mandatory for upgrading. As for the 6 white ones, I could choose to build them or not. They are single bed, refrigerator, Coca-Cola production line, and moldy bread production line. Binoculars, white quality, 10 units of ore. Bun production line, white quality, requires 100 buns. I carefully studied all the data in the cockpit and reached a clear conclusion. Inside the train, You can basically form a closed ecological cycle. It's entirely self-sufficient, like a mobile shelter. In fact, if the train level is high enough and all components are upgraded accordingly, I'd have a massive, sci-fi train full of violent beauty. As for the moldy bread line needing 100 slices of moldy bread to build, it sounded weird, but I accepted it quickly. After what happened at the mine, everything was already sci-fi enough. Next, the priority was to tally my resources and decide which components to build first. I loaded my pistol and took 4 more magazines from the other pistols. I filled every magazine before leaving the cockpit and heading to Slave Carriage 7. Inside, there was no riot. On the contrary, it was quite orderly. Each slave was handing over the ore they'd carried, piling it into a small mountain on the floor. As soon as I arrived, Lao Zhu rushed over with his pickaxe. "Master Mang, the tally is done. Total of 356 stones, or 356 units." I nodded, my gaze sweeping over everyone. I said calmly, "A train can't be without guards. The next 3 days will be a trial period. The 10 best performers will be promoted to guards. You'll be allowed to carry weapons and eat your fill every day. Everyone else, immediately go to the scrap carriages and gather all remaining ore." I paused, my voice dropping. "You must understand one thing. I saved your lives. I don't need your gratitude. I just need you to remember, if I have the power to save you, I have the power to kill you. Now get out." The moment I finished, a spark of light appeared in the slaves' eyes. They shook off their previous lethargy and rushed out of the carriage, scavenging the scrap cars with incredible speed, completely ignoring the thick blood and filth inside. I stood on the wasteland, watching calmly. In the member assignment section, there were 4 basic roles: captain, deputy captain, train guard, and survivor. You can define more roles, but these are the 4 foundations. Train guards are the henchmen, and survivors are essentially slaves, just a nicer name. I said 3 days of trial, but in reality, I'd picked 10 people to be the thugs for this train before nightfall. After all, my captain's trial was only missing the last step: acquire 3 henchmen and 10 slaves within 3 months. Reward, unknown. Completing this would officially unlock my full train panel. And the faster I finished, the better the reward. The previous 2 tasks had such generous rewards because I finished them so fast. Normally, I'd only get a standard train order. Lao Zhu. Lao Zhu was rolling up his pants to go scavenge. Hearing me call, he stopped and ran over. "Master Mang, what are your orders?" "You don't need to scavenge." I looked at him and said directly, "I need a deputy captain. I've chosen you." I patted his shoulder and gave a thin smile. "You have experience as a deputy. I'll go to the cockpit later and officially appoint you, giving you the corresponding permissions. When that's done, you'll need to tell me what a new captain needs to watch out for. This is my first time in this position. I'll be relying on your help." Lao Zhu's eyes flashed with disbelief and excitement. Immediately, he fell to his knees, tears welling up, his voice raspy with emotion. "Master Mang, rest assured, I won't let you down." Actually, from the moment he saw me take out the order and become captain, he knew he'd met his benefactor. His status was bound to change from slave to deputy captain sooner or later. Besides him, there was no one else suitable. Only he had been a deputy before and was the first to follow me, so the spot was his. A train can't be run by one person. It needs a crew to manage it. The captain shouldn't have to handle every little detail. But even though he guessed it, he had to act shocked and moved. As a subordinate, it's best not to refuse the superior's goodwill. When you receive a favor, your reaction must be clear. You can't be too stoic. He didn't know how to be a leader, but having been a subordinate his whole life, he knew exactly how to be a perfect one. Besides, this leader was much better than the old one. No weird habits, no nonsense, and he radiated a natural authority. He didn't feel like a petty man who'd suddenly come into power. About that, Lao Zhu hesitated, then asked tentatively, "Master Mang, there are 7 or 8 women among the slaves. Right now they're covered in filth and rags, so you can't see their faces or figures. Should I have them wash up and bring them to you?" "No need." I shook my head. The situation was still dangerous. Basic safety wasn't even guaranteed. I didn't have the headspace for that. "Did your previous captain like that sort of thing?" "You could say that." Lao Zhu scratched the back of his head and whispered awkwardly, The old captain had a foot fungus fetish. He specifically found slaves with severe foot fungus to make sure his own was maintained. Then he'd pick some slave girls to soak his feet in hot water every day and use a twisted towel to saw between his toes. He said it was the greatest pleasure on earth, better than a wedding night. But strangely, he never actually touched the women. Just then, the slaves finished gathering the resources and piled them to the side. I waved them over to move everything near the cockpit, then told Lao Zhu to tally it all. I stood on the wasteland, watching the slaves who looked a bit lost. In the level 1 component list, there was a moldy bread line, but no sand-mixed water line. In other words, the train could provide pure water, but they chose to add sand. I quickly understood why. It was a deliberate tactic to create class disparity. It gave the henchmen a clear sense of superiority and gave the slaves a reason to strive for promotion. Conflict between the two lower tiers would dilute conflict between the captain and the slaves, keeping the train stable. I looked toward the horizon. The zombie tide was gone, leaving only hundreds of corpses scattered around. These zombies had some ethics. They didn't eat their own kind. I planned to head back to the mine later to keep digging. Since becoming captain, I realized everything costs, or without it, you can't move an inch. I'd already mentally picked a few people to be thugs, about a dozen who were clearly stronger than the rest. Soon, Lao Zhu ran back. Master Mang, everything is tallied. Here's the list. I took the small, densely written scrap of paper from him. I don't even know where he found it. Level 1 heavy machine gun ammo, 12.7 millimeters, 400 plus rounds. Level 1 pistol ammo, 9 millimeters, 200 plus rounds. Pistols, 12. Heavy machine gun, 1. Total, 1,500 units of iron ore, 120 units of copper ore, 100 units of wood. Bread slices, 600 plus. Mineral water, 300 bottles. Buns, 100. Pickles, 80 packs. I nodded, quite satisfied. This list was very clear. Most important was the number of pistols. I'd tallied them myself earlier. If Lao Zhu's numbers didn't match, he'd be lying in a pool of blood right now. I remembered clearly. These pistols weren't made by the train, so they could harm the captain. As long as a gun is made by the train's production line, even if the ammo isn't, it can't hurt the captain. That's the train's rule. Master Mang. Lao Zhu whispered beside me. These pistols can't be given to the thugs. All trains only allow thugs to use weapons made by the train's own lines. That's the only way to ensure the captain's absolute safety. Normally, if a thug or slave finds a gun while scavenging and doesn't hand it over, they're executed on the spot. I see. I tucked the paper into my shirt and looked at the train behind me. The train that belonged to me. I still hadn't named it. Currently, a level 1 train basically has no heavy firepower. Combat still relies on thugs with guns. Only as the train upgrades and unlocks higher quality components will it truly become a mobile fortress with terrifying firepower. For now, it's just a vehicle. The road ahead is long. 1,500 units of iron, 120 of copper, 100 of wood. I looked at the numbers again, thinking. The first thing to build was definitely carriages. At least 2. One for the slaves and one for ore, food, and supplies. I also needed to build the dragon-slaying assault rifle line immediately. I said nothing more and walked into the cockpit. Standing before the console, I looked at the 5th red button. Train construction. After pressing it, several lines appeared. Build a standard carriage, 100 units of iron ore. Build an engine, 1,000 units of iron ore. This was under construction, not components. Building an extra engine at the back meant the train wouldn't have to turn around to change direction. It could just use the rear engine for power, greatly increasing maneuverability. I lightly tapped the first option twice. The cockpit vibrated slightly. I stepped out to look. The lonely engine on the wasteland suddenly erupted with white light at the rear coupling. The light intertwined, gradually forming 2 new carriages. When the light faded, 2 complete carriages were now connected to the engine. Looking at it again, my train has finally taken shape. Of course, the 2 carriages are still empty inside, nothing but cold iron shells. But this is enough. How good of a treatment does a slave carriage need anyway? In this day and age, a survivor is already incredibly lucky just to have a train to rely on. Good. I stood in front of the train, observing it for a long time with satisfaction. An indescribable sense of pride swelled in my chest. I felt like I had integrated just a little more into this world. Maybe one day, I really can build an apocalyptic train that roars like a dragon, tearing across the wasteland. 200 units of iron ore have been consumed. I returned to the second carriage and took out the blueprint for the Tunglong assault rifle production line from my chest. It was a pale green, semi-transparent piece of paper. It felt like plastic to the touch and looked quite fragile. Of course, I wasn't bored enough to test if it tore easily. You need blueprints to craft special vehicle attachments. The train can't just craft the attachments already displayed on the control panel. Those don't need blueprints. There are also many special attachments that absolutely require blueprints to be created. The grade of this production line is green. Crafting it costs 500 units of iron ore. As the iron ore was deducted, the blueprint instantly shattered, turning into countless green motes of light that gathered into several glowing streams inside the carriage. Finally, those streams of light slowly wove together, forming a production line about 6 meters long. Its overall shape looked quite similar to a subway security scanner. For every 50 units of iron ore consumed, this line can produce one Tunglong assault rifle. Its design is extremely similar to the AK-47, using 5.56 millimeters caliber bullets. The unfortunate thing is that I currently don't have this type of ammo, nor the corresponding production line. But luckily, every crafted rifle automatically comes with 3 full magazines, each holding 30 rounds. That's enough for now. I'll figure out how to find an ammo production line later. The crafting time for one rifle is 5 minutes. I crafted 12 rifles in one go, consuming another 600 units of iron ore. There's one very convenient feature. As long as the iron ore is on the train, it will automatically be deducted during crafting. I don't need to hold it in my hands. After that, I stepped out of the second carriage, stood on the wasteland thinking for a moment, and then spent another 100 units of iron ore to craft a standard carriage. There wasn't enough storage space. The production line and iron ore need their own dedicated carriage, while bread, mineral water, and other daily supplies also need a separate one. So, the train now has 3 carriages. Carriage number 2 will temporarily serve as a warehouse for the production line and ores. Carriage number 3 is the living quarters, and carriage number 4 is the slave carriage. At this point, I only have exactly 100 units of iron ore left. I've practically gone back to the Stone Age overnight. Everything requires iron ore, and this amount is nowhere near enough. I haven't even crafted a single one of the 7 mandatory attachments to upgrade the train. I simply don't have any spare iron ore. The train doesn't even have an electrical system yet. The carriages are pitch black, without even a dim light. It's far worse than the previous train. Once the slave carriage's doors are closed, it's pitch black. Fortunately, both the electrical system and the generator consume copper ore. Thinking for a moment, I felt these 2 things were still very necessary. Looking at the 120 units of copper ore I just acquired, I immediately spent 110 units to craft both the electrical system and the generator. The generator was placed in the second carriage warehouse. It wasn't small, taking up nearly a 1/7 of the carriage's floor space. However, I stood in the second carriage, staring blankly at the generator in front of me. The display panel clearly stated, activating the generator requires 1 energy stone. With the train's current consumption rate, a level 1 energy stone can provide continuous power for over 300 days. Energy stone, a completely unfamiliar name. I immediately ran back to the locomotive, stood in front of the control panel, and opened the beginner's guide to look it up. Very quickly, I found the origin of this item. After the world fell into the apocalypse, traditional energy sources like oil lost their dominance, replaced by energy stones. When the train is upgraded to level 2, a new attachment called the crafting table can be built. There, iron ore can be consumed to craft energy stones. But before that point, there is almost no other way to obtain this item. Even starting the train requires an energy stone as a power source. When the train is built, the system automatically provides a level 1 energy stone. If I want to activate this generator, my only option is to remove the energy stone from the locomotive and install it there. But obviously, that's impossible. I looked back at the compliance prompts displayed on the control panel. Currently, there are 3 carriages. The carriages have not been equipped with protective armor. It is recommended to quickly craft train armor to ensure passenger safety in the event of an attack. Energy stone status, 100%. Based on the train's current weight, it can maintain a maximum speed of 100 kilometers per hour for 100 hours. As the train's weight increases, the maximum speed will decrease, and the energy stone consumption rate will accelerate. Please try to recruit more survivors to ensure sufficient resources. These prompts automatically appear when I don't press any other buttons on the control panel. It looks a lot like a tutorial in a game, guiding a novice captain on what to do at this stage. Sigh. I let out a soft breath, rubbing my temples. I'll stop thinking about it for now. Of course, I know I need to quickly install iron armor on the train to increase safety. But the carriage iron armor attachment requires 1,000 units of iron ore. I absolutely don't have that much right now. To get it, my only option is to quickly go back and mine. I stepped out of the carriage, called a few slaves over, and mounted the only intact heavy machine gun I had looted onto the roof of the second cargo carriage. When I placed the gun in the right spot, a control panel immediately popped up in front of me. Please name your train as soon as possible. Do you allow the cat-mounted heavy machine gun attachment to be installed on the roof of carriage 2 of the unnamed train? I selected confirm. Immediately after, the heavy machine gun was seamlessly integrated into the roof of the second carriage, looking as if it had always belonged there. Only if I detach and discard this carriage will the heavy machine gun fall off, just like when I first acquired it. I currently have over 400 rounds of heavy machine gun ammo. With a gun like this, that amount of ammo will hardly sustain a long battle. It's mostly just for deterrence. But that's enough. At least the train, which initially had 0 firepower, now exudes a bit of danger. Next, I transferred all the gathered resources onto the train. After ordering all the slaves into carriage 4, I prepared to depart. By this time, the batch of Tunglong assault rifles had also been fully crafted. I called out the 10 men I had pre-selected from the slaves, officially appointed them as train patrol guards, and handed each of them a rifle along with 3 full magazines. I looked over these 10 mercenaries in their ragged clothes one by one, frowned, and said, "Before tomorrow morning, choose a captain among yourselves. Who gets to be captain is up to you to negotiate. No causing casualties that would affect our operations." Then I called Lao Zhu over and officially appointed him as the vice captain. At this point, the basic framework of the train had been formed. Although everything was still very crude, and even these mercenaries were just the best options under limited conditions, everything in the world starts from a rough shape. Nothing is born perfect. Everything starts as an embryo and gradually moves toward completion. Then I announced the new rules. All slaves get 1 cup of water and 2 slices of moldy bread every day. All mercenaries get 2 bottles of mineral water, 6 steamed buns, and a packet of pickled vegetables every day. I'm not against creating class disparities to maintain order and status in the apocalypse, but I don't intend to starve the slaves to exhaustion either. How would they have the strength to mine if I did? The food I looted from the previous train is still enough for now. Once we mine more ore and craft a food production line, things will get easier. After that, all the slaves went into carriage 4, while Lao Zhu and the mercenaries stayed in carriage 3. There aren't many daily supplies in carriage 3 yet, so there's still enough room for them to live. It's just that I haven't been able to craft chairs, so everyone has to sit on the floor. Only Lao Zhu has a dedicated bed for himself. I collected a total of 7 single beds. I kept 2, one for Lao Zhu in carriage 3, and one in my control room. I'm still used to being alone in the locomotive. It makes me feel safer even when I sleep. The steel door of the control room is very sturdy. The front windshield is also reinforced bulletproof glass, making it hard to break in a short time. I threw away the remaining beds because there was nowhere to install them. Soon after, accompanied by the fierce roar of the engine, this pitch-black train finally ended its brief rest. The wheels spun rapidly, and the train shot forward, aiming straight for the iron mine where I had started. The distance to the mine wasn't too close. When I fled, I was in the slave carriage, so I couldn't see the direction clearly and didn't know where the mine was. But a train running on the wasteland leaves clear tracks. I just needed to follow the old tracks back. The train's current wheels are still the most common type, so the speed isn't considered fast. But on flat terrain like the wasteland, it's sufficient for now. In the train's control room, I looked at Lao Zhu standing next to me. I smiled faintly and said, "Tell me about the cause of the former captain's death. Let's see if we can learn any lessons from it." I had just used the walkie-talkie to call Lao Zhu from carriage 3 straight to the locomotive. This walkie-talkie was also a spoil of war I had acquired earlier. It was a zombie tide. Lao Zhu shook his head, a flash of fear in his eyes. On the Iron Ridge wasteland, a large-scale zombie tide like this time is actually not common. The one we encountered last time was much smaller. At that time, the train was only level 1, and its speed was slow. In the panic of fleeing, we crashed straight into city ruins. The ruins blocked the train's path forward. In the panic, everyone abandoned the train and ran. In the end, they were swept up by the zombie tide, almost all dying in the mouths of the zombies. I ran pretty fast, didn't dare to look back, and ducked into a random alley in the city ruins, which is how I kept my life. Large-scale zombie tides all have commanders, and zombies usually don't go deep into city ruins. That's how I survived. Hearing this, I narrowed my eyes and nodded. It seemed my recent escape was also partly due to luck. A zombie with intelligence and the ability to command is definitely not level 1. If that commander zombie had set its sights on me at that time, my sensory shielding device probably wouldn't have been of any use. But thinking about it carefully, a train carriage sitting in the middle of a zombie horde is very conspicuous. It shouldn't have completely escaped notice. Could it be that the commander zombie was also just level 1? I looked out the window at the empty, desolate wasteland, deep in thought. My gaze gradually settled on the area where the carriages used to be in front of the locomotive. Before leaving, I had used the earth core furnace to swallow all the abandoned carriages. It only took about 15 minutes, yielding a total of 600 units of iron ore. The scene at that time was quite terrifying. The locomotive directly opened up like a giant mouth, swallowing the scrap carriages whole. Inside, countless spinning gears ground all the steel shells into fine powder. After the apocalypse, are there no other gathering places besides the wasteland? You could say there are. Lao Zhu paused for a moment before continuing. For some unknown reason, many monsters don't want to go deep into the city ruins. So there are still quite a few survivors hiding in there. Besides that, I once heard over the train's radio that a few large-scale gathering places were established after the apocalypse. Those places have several trains coexisting. It's just that the distance was too far, and the former captain had no intention of going there to check it out. I frowned slightly. If that's the case, the city ruins are relatively safe. At the very least, finding food is much easier than on the wasteland. So why did those survivors get on the train? Lao Zhu was momentarily speechless. After a while, he said softly, "Brother Mang, the slaves were all forced onto the train. Who would willingly become a slave?" I nodded expressionlessly, saying nothing more. It seems that besides maintaining order on the train, the mercenaries also have to take on the job of capturing slaves. This position of captain, I still have a lot to learn. Right at that moment, the birthmark on the back of my hand heated up again. A hint of a smile appeared in my eyes. The trainee captain mission was finally completed. At this point, my train's control panel was finally fully unlocked. I didn't know what new functions there would be, but I just hoped it was something that could help me gather more resources, because I was truly lacking them. For example, giving me an extra 10,000 units of iron ore every day. That would make me very satisfied. Congratulations on completing all trainee captain missions and officially becoming a qualified captain. The captain's control panel is fully unlocked. You have also acquired the following effect: infinite upgrade. All vehicle attachments belonging to your train will have no level cap and can be upgraded infinitely. That's it. I looked at the semi-transparent control panel in front of me, a bit confused. It didn't sound too overpowered. Just that attachments aren't level capped and can be upgraded forever. It didn't feel very intuitive. When in doubt, I immediately turned to ask Lao Zhu. After all, he used to be a vice captain. He definitely understood these things better than I did. This was also the main reason I chose him as vice captain. Lao Zhu, I turned my head to look at him. Does every vehicle attachment have a level cap? That's right. Lao Zhu immediately nodded, his expression serious. Vehicle attachments are divided by grades, such as white, green, and blue. The higher the grade, the rarer the attachment, and the higher the level cap. For example, like many other white attachments, most of their maximum levels stop at level 2. Lao Zhu continued, his voice slowing down. For instance, a white attachment I used to know of was called the train blade. Its effect is installing two sharp steel blades on both sides of the train. When encountering a zombie tide, the whole train becomes like a sharp sword, directly slicing every zombie in its path in half. It's not a default train attachment, but requires a blueprint that drops randomly after killing monsters in the wasteland. The previous captain once obtained this blueprint during a fight against a zombie tide. But that attachment could only be upgraded to level 2 at most. After upgrading to level 2, the steel blades were larger and sharper, but that was it. After all, it was still just a white attachment, the kind you use temporarily when you're weak. A truly powerful train has to rely on higher grade attachments. I slowly opened my mouth, my eyes somewhat dazed as I looked at the birthmark on the back of my hand. At this moment, I completely understood the true meaning of the words infinite upgrade. In other words, even if it's a white attachment, it can be upgraded without limits. A level 2 train blade might just be a temporary tool when you're weak, but what if it's a level 10 train blade? What about level 20, level 50, or even level 100? When my train charges through, I'm afraid not even a single blade of grass will survive. This time, it's truly solid. My control panel, even in the world of USB plugins, is absolutely a top-tier existence. My stats are just higher than everyone else's, plain and simple. I took a deep breath. Although I didn't know why the birthmark I had since birth had such a terrifying effect after coming to this world, whatever. No need to overthink it. Maybe in my past life, I was a kind person who accumulated good karma for 9 generations, and this is my reward in this life. Currently, I only have one vehicle attachment that has reached level 2, and that is the Earth Core Furnace. A level 1 Earth Core Furnace can only swallow level 1 trains. Earlier, to swallow those abandoned level 2 carriages, I spent my last 100 units of iron or to upgrade it to level 2. Now, I only have 600 units of iron ore left in my hands. What a pity. These slaves still need to sleep and rest. Otherwise, if they could work in shifts for 24 hours, the amount of iron ore gathered would definitely be much higher. For now, I need to upgrade the train to level 2 first. Then, I'll enter the nearest city ruins, capture more slaves, get more iron ore, and build an increasingly powerful train. I'll just keep repeating this process until my train roars fearlessly across the wasteland. Half an hour later, I returned to the entrance of the iron mine. Under the familiar shouts of the mercenaries, groups of slaves stepped out of the train carriages one after another, grabbed their pickaxes, and went down into the mine to dig. This scene was so familiar it gave me a sense of déjà vu. The only difference was that this morning, I was still standing in the ranks of the slaves, and now I was standing in the train's control room. Perhaps the apocalypse isn't entirely without its upsides. As long as your luck is good enough, going from a slave to a captain only takes a few hours. If it were peacetime, going from a slave to a captain would absolutely require more than just luck. In the train's control room, I looked at the train's member list displayed on the screen. As of now, the train has 10 mercenaries and 81 slaves. Everyone's name is displayed in white. Once someone dies, their name will immediately turn black. This function helps the captain keep track of the life and death status of all passengers. Perhaps last night, when I killed that slave in the carriage, the mercenaries rushed over immediately because of this function. It's just that. I narrowed my eyes, looking into the distance. If this function exists, then the old captain definitely knows that this batch of slaves isn't dead, and has even left the old train to join another one. That fleeing locomotive. Will it come back looking for us? But thinking about it, even if it does come back, I'm not too afraid. I currently have 10 mercenaries armed with assault rifles, plus a heavy machine gun. It's not like I don't have the ability to defend myself. Somewhere else on the wasteland, inside a rather shabby-looking locomotive that was fleeing in a hurry, a plump man looked at the train's member list on the screen and suddenly froze. Initially, he was heartbroken over the dead slaves, because he had spent a lot of effort to capture those 300-plus slaves. Now they were all gone. Starting over from scratch wouldn't be easy. But what he couldn't believe was that the train's member list showed nearly 100 of his slaves were still alive. Furthermore, they had joined an unnamed level 1 train. Among them, a slave named Chun Mang had even become the captain. How could this be? At the time, he had thrown this batch of slaves straight into the zombie tide. How could they have survived that situation? The plump man gritted his teeth, his eyes filled with rage. That slave Chen Meng must have stumbled upon some kind of fortuitous encounter. On the wasteland, the one thing that's never lacking is fortuitous encounters. As long as your luck is good enough, anything can happen. But what made him unable to swallow this anger was that he had severed his tail to survive and flee, only for his slave to pick up a fortuitous encounter and become a captain. How could he stand for this? A newly built train basically has no offensive capabilities. It's no different from a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. The zombie tide had been shaken off. His most important task now was to find that batch of slaves, kill that upstart captain, and bring all the slaves that belonged to him back. Although he didn't know the exact location of that batch of slaves, a newly appointed captain would definitely quickly realize the importance of an iron mine. Therefore, almost without needing to guess, that Chen Meng must have returned to the mining area by now. As long as he returned to the mine, he could bring all his slaves back. I really have to thank you. The plump man suddenly burst into loud laughter, his eyes flashing with a mix of gloom and excitement. If it weren't for you, my 100 slaves would probably all be dead. As long as I can get these 100 slaves back, rebuilding will be much easier. This fat man was none other than Boss Kuan, the captain of the old train I used to be on. But right now, inside his locomotive cabin, 10 people were crammed together. Boss Kuan, a man holding a baton, spoke up softly, his voice somewhat hesitant. Our carriage with the heavy machine gun was abandoned. Right now, this locomotive has almost no offensive capabilities. Should we use the train blade blueprint right away? At least it would add some means of attack. If I were here, I would definitely recognize this man immediately. He was the one who ordered the thugs to beat me with batons in the slave carriage before. One of Boss Kuan's trusted aides. When fleeing, Boss Kuan couldn't bring all his thugs, only his closest confidants and a few men he trusted. Right now, inside the locomotive cabin, besides the 6 thugs, there was Boss Kuan, a vice captain, and his 2 women. Although these 2 women weren't bad-looking, their faces still clearly showed the panic from the disaster they had just experienced. Being trusted aides, they were quite aware of the blueprints Boss Kuan possessed. This was information ordinary thugs couldn't know. Boss Kuan glanced at the white-grade train blade blueprint on the table and shook his head. Crafting this attachment requires 500 units of iron ore. Even though it's just a white attachment, the cost is higher than quite a few green attachments. Currently, there are only over 200 units of iron ore left in the car. It's not enough to craft it. He paused for a moment, then continued. Besides, I don't need to use this thing. It's just a novice train. It doesn't even have the qualifications to craft the most basic gun and ammo production lines. Whether it's external vehicle weapons or personal weapons, you have to be a level 2 train or higher to make them. What kind of offensive methods could a level 1 train possibly have? We all have guns. As long as we find them, we can easily capture them all. They're just a bunch of slaves. Kill the leader and it's done. What risks could there be? Hearing this, the middle-aged man didn't say anything more. He just looked down at the pistol and baton in his hands, a vague sense of unease rising in his heart. Who was Chen Meng? He had never heard of him. But his intuition told him that this was very likely the slave leader he had appointed in Slave Carriage 7. A cold-blooded guy. He remembered very clearly. Relying on just a few people and these few guns, was it really safe? He didn't know how those people survived the zombie tide. But since they did, picking up guns and ammo from the abandoned carriages certainly wouldn't be hard. So why was Boss Kuan acting completely fearless? Suddenly, the man seemed to realize something, his voice turning hoarse with excitement. Boss Kuan, I understand. Even if they picked up pistols and ammo, those weapons were produced by our train. They can't cause damage to you. Humph. Boss Kuan pulled the woman next to him into his arms, narrowing his eyes in a smug smile. Figured it out now? It's not too late. Did you really think your Boss Kuan would be stupid enough to charge straight in? Anyone who survives long in the wasteland is no fool. Let's go. As long as we have these slaves, rebuilding our enterprise won't be hard. I just hope that Chen Meng had the sense to return to the mine and didn't run around the wasteland in fear, letting this fat piece of meat fall into someone else's hands. Right. The man nodded in agreement. For a level 1 train to have 10 slaves was already considered pretty good. Often, even the captain had to go down into the mine to dig, or himself. A level 1 train with no offensive capabilities possessing 100 slaves was truly no different from a fat piece of meat wandering the wasteland. On the wasteland, the sun was gradually setting, the evening glow dyeing the sky red. Next to the mine, my train was parked quietly. I sat in the cabin, constantly studying the various information and vehicle attachments. Every train has its own development focus. Some focus on speed, some lean towards firepower, some have thick armor, and some are agile. There are all kinds. But my idea is an all-rounder train. At this moment, I was studying the attachments while cross-referencing the information and rules in the beginner's guide. Lao Zhu was sorting and storing the minerals and daily supplies in living carriage 3. The remaining 10 thugs stood around holding assault rifles, patrolling and standing guard. This morning, these 10 people were still just slaves. By the afternoon, they had become thugs holding assault rifles. The change in status and treatment made their steps much lighter, even though their bodies were still thin and sallow, trying hard to show their difference from the rest of the slaves. That feeling is very similar to the newly emerged middle class after peacetime, always finding ways to prove they no longer belong to the people at the bottom. Once people reach a certain position, they will try their best to prove they deserve it. Even if it might be a bit ridiculous at first, over time, they will truly stand firm. Right at this moment, I suddenly noticed a locomotive in the distant wasteland charging straight towards us at extremely high speed. I immediately jumped up from my seat, grabbed my binoculars, and looked through the windshield, focusing on the front. Sure enough, they're here. My expression changed slightly. I immediately grabbed the walkie-talkie and ordered all the thugs to board the train and prepare for battle. That locomotive, unsurprisingly, was the very train I used to be on. After all, it's rare for a train to be just a bare locomotive. Even I have 3 carriages now. Given the opponent's accelerating posture, it was obvious they intended to ram straight into us at top speed. The opponent is a level 2 train, so its armor is definitely thicker than my level 1 train. If we get hit head-on, let alone being smashed to pieces, my train will at least be flipped over. I have to circle behind the mine. As long as I don't let the opponent hit me head-on, I still have a chance to win. Almost in an instant, I made my decision. I immediately steered the train around a low dirt mound a few meters high, planning to play Ring Around the Rosie with the opponent. A few dozen seconds later, I noticed the opponent's speed starting to slow down. I was a bit stunned, somewhat not believing my eyes. Why slow down? Aren't they going to ram straight in? If they don't ram, what offensive methods does a single locomotive have? It doesn't seem to have any external weapon attachments either. Wait, I suddenly understood, my expression turning bizarre. This boss Cohen, does he think my train is newly built, has no offensive capabilities, and wants to capture everyone alive to avoid heavy casualties, then take us back to be slaves? And at the same time, he wants to keep my train intact and directly couple it to his train? It sounds unbelievable, but looking at the slowing locomotive, it's obvious the opponent is really thinking that way. In theory, this is indeed the optimal choice for Boss Cohen to maximize his benefits, but at the same time, it's also the choice that maximizes his risks. Understanding this, I immediately spoke quickly into the walkie-talkie. Lao Zhu, find something to cover the heavy machine gun. Everyone listen to my orders. No one fires without my command. Normally, a level 1 train indeed doesn't have any offensive capabilities. Among the 13 craftable vehicle attachments, not a single one is a weapon. The only defensive attachment is the carriage iron armor, which requires a whopping 1,000 units of iron ore. Boss Cohen's decision, theoretically speaking, is absolutely not wrong. But this world always has exceptions. So greedy. I stood in the cabin, looking at the opponent's slowly decelerating locomotive through the binoculars, muttering to myself. There's a path to heaven, yet you refuse to take it. There's no door to hell, yet you barge right in. Since the opponent was so arrogant, I naturally gladly accepted this. Reducing casualties is always a good thing. In the apocalypse, every life is a precious productive resource. Very quickly, a few dozen seconds later, that blood-stained locomotive slowly came to a stop, barely a few dozen meters away from my train. Phew. I took a deep breath, preparing to order Lao Zhu to use the heavy machine gun on the roof of Carriage 2 to fire a preemptive strike. I wasn't sure if it could pierce their armor, but right at that moment, Before I could even give the order, I saw 8 people step down from that locomotive. 8 men holding guns, leisurely strolling towards us as if they were taking a walk. The fat man leading them had a contemptuous smile on his lips and roared, "Where is Chen Mang? Tell him to come out." My God. I stood in the cabin, looking at the scene before me, my mind going a bit blank. How could anyone be this arrogant? Or do they really have some solid backing? Like special bulletproof vests, for example. But even if they have body armor, it can't stop a bullet to the head. If I initially thought the opponent was just arrogant, now I felt they must have something to rely on. Hesitating for a moment, I still gave the order over the walkie-talkie. "Everyone, open fire. Hold off on the heavy machine gun for now." Immediately after, Carriage 3, which was parked close to the mine, suddenly opened its side doors. 10 thugs holding Tunglong assault rifles automatically stood at the edge of the carriage, pointed their muzzles at the group of people, and without any hesitation, pulled the triggers. The deafening sound of gunfire echoed across the wasteland. At a distance of only 20 or 30 meters, for automatic assault rifles, this was practically a can't-miss range. As long as you empty a magazine, even if your aim isn't great, you're bound to hit the target. In just the first volley of bullets, the 8 men advancing fell into pools of blood one after another. I stood in the cabin, patiently waiting for a few dozen more seconds before continuing to give orders. "Move forward. Double tap. Confirm everyone is dead." I didn't get off the train myself. If there was a trap or some trick, I could very well die on the spot. I just needed to stand in the back and command. When those 10 men, under my supervision, approached each corpse, pointed their guns at their heads, and fired another shot. Only when the absolute confirmation of death signal was relayed back through the walkie-talkie did I softly sigh. It really was. I could only consider this a case of scaring myself. I originally thought it would be a fierce life-and-death battle, but who knew it would end so simply? Through this incident, I learned a very clear lesson. When facing any enemy, you must go all out from the very beginning. Absolutely do not underestimate them. After that, I finally stood up myself, holding an assault rifle in my hand. Under the escort of the thugs, I stepped out of the locomotive and walked towards the ownerless locomotive parked not far away. I didn't know if there was anything valuable left inside, but according to the rules of this world, once the owner dies, that locomotive automatically becomes an ownerless item. Inside the cabin, 2 women were huddled in the corner, their eyes filled with panic, so terrified they were covering their mouths tightly. I waved my hand, signaling the thugs to take these 2 women out first, and then I carefully searched the entire cabin alone. There was only a little iron ore and some food left. Clearly, when surrounded by the zombie tide and forced to detach the carriages, that boss Cohen was in too much of a hurry and barely had time to bring anything. Wait. My gaze suddenly stopped on a blueprint placed on the control panel. I immediately walked over. Blueprint name, Train Blade. Blueprint grade, white. Crafting cost, 500 units of iron ore. I was slightly stunned. Wasn't this train blade the exact white attachment Lao Zhu had mentioned? A type of attachment that could only be upgraded to level 2 at most, a transitional item used when you're weak. Earlier, I had even thought, with my infinite upgrade ability, what kind of effect it would have if I pushed this thing to level 10. It's just that this attachment wasn't on the train's default crafting list, but had to drop randomly after killing monsters in the wasteland. I wasn't expecting much from it. I didn't expect to get the blueprint in my hands so quickly. Boss Cohen really traveled thousands of miles just to deliver a gift to my door. Sending a blueprint from afar, the gift is heavy, and the sentiment is deep indeed. Excellent. I curled my lips into a satisfied smile, carefully tucking the blueprint into my pocket. I definitely have to try crafting it later to see the effect. It would be best to upgrade it straight to level 10 to see if there's a qualitative change. Having handled everything, I waved my hand, signaling the thugs to transfer all the resources and food from the cabin, preparing to return to my train and use the earth core furnace to swallow this ownerless locomotive. Might as well recover some extra resources. As I walked past the 8 corpses lying in pools of blood, I looked at Boss Cohen's body, his eyes still glaring wide open, clearly showing his unwillingness to accept his fate, and I sighed softly. This incident made me, who was already always vigilant, even more cautious when facing enemies. In the apocalypse, any arrogance is synonymous with seeking your own death. It was only then that I noticed 3 very familiar faces among those 8 people. They were the 3 thugs who had beaten me with batons in the slave carriage. I originally thought they had long died in the mouths of zombies, but I didn't expect to meet them again here. What a coincidence. I curled my lip, originally intending to raise my gun and empty a magazine into those 3 corpses to vent my anger, but on second thought, I decided against it. Better to save ammo. Lao Zhu was currently quickly collecting the guns and ammo from their bodies. Weapons crafted by other trains are contraband. They absolutely cannot fall into the hands of thugs or slaves. I didn't say anything more, just returned to the control cabin, steered the train towards the ownerless locomotive, and activated the earth core furnace. Right before my eyes, my locomotive opened up like a giant mouth. Countless gears spun at high speed, directly swallowing the ownerless locomotive whole. Iron or units plus 1,000. As expected of a level 2 locomotive. The amount of iron ore recovered was even more than swallowing those several carriages earlier. This locomotive looked like it had upgraded armor. If it had really rammed straight into me at top speed just now, I definitely would have been in big trouble. A battle that was supposed to be fierce ended up concluding in an unbelievably simple way. In the control cabin, I started thinking about 2 issues. First, what should I name my train? Second, with a total of 1,600 units of iron ore currently available, which attachment should I craft first? After thinking for a moment, I finally decided on a name. Let's just call it the Starfarer. Starfarer. This name isn't bad. I sat in the control room, muttering it to myself a few times. The more I said it, the more natural it felt. The Starfarer train. It has enough prestige and power. Who knows, maybe one day I can even drive it out into space. When that time comes, even in the cosmos, this name will still be domineering enough. Actually, I originally planned to name it Overthrow Everything, but thinking about it carefully, that name was a bit too much, not suitable to show off. Right at that moment, a knock came from outside the control room door. I casually pressed a button on the control panel, and the train door immediately opened. The person who walked in was Lao Zhu. Brother Mang. Lao Zhu looked a bit hesitant, asking cautiously in a low voice. I have a few suggestions. I don't know if I should say them. Go ahead. I sat in my chair, looking at him seriously. After all, Lao Zhu used to be a vice captain. His experience is very much worth referencing. It's like this. After getting my permission, Lao Zhu organized his words and slowly spoke. First of all, I have to admit one thing. I've followed a few captains, but Brother Mang is the most magnanimous person I've ever met. I think we can go very far. Lao Zhu looked at me, his voice deepening. Maybe we really can build an absolutely safe train in the apocalypse. Moreover, for an organization to develop far enough, the first thing it needs is the power of unity. Not just between the captain and the vice captain, but all the passengers on this train. When everyone is working towards the same goal, the organization can move forward as fast as a chariot. If Brother Mang has to shoulder everything alone, it will be very tiring. In the apocalypse, trust is an extremely luxurious thing. Many captains fear their deputies or thugs will betray them, and fear the slaves will riot, so they set up all sorts of harsh rules. Any violation means being shot on the spot, using cold-blooded methods to rule the entire organization. But I've always felt those things are unnecessary. Making one person completely loyal to another, especially in an apocalyptic environment like this, is inherently extremely difficult. For example, Brother Mang, do you completely trust me? Or completely trust that thug? It's very hard. Your trust in them is actually based on the fact that the weapons they use are crafted by the train and can't harm you. Everyone understands this. You don't care about the casualties of the thugs. So when they themselves know this clearly, how can they wholeheartedly dedicate themselves to the train? When facing battles with a huge disparity, how would they dare to risk their lives and charge forward? When all the passengers on the train are on guard against each other, things like betrayal or riots are practically inevitable. I understand what you mean. I frowned slightly, interrupting him. Just state your suggestions directly. Of course I have them, Lao Zhu quickly replied, his voice much clearer. As a qualified subordinate, he understood one thing very well. Superiors hate people who only point out problems without offering solutions. Making everyone loyal to Brother Mang is very hard and very vague. But making everyone loyal to the train is much easier. When everyone feels they are a part of the train, whether they are fighting or mining, they won't feel like they are being exploited, but rather striving for their own future. That will generate greater unity and motivation. Step 1. Adjust the class differences. Many trains deliberately mix sand into the clean water for slaves to drink, creating stratification so the thugs feel a sense of superiority. At the same time, when they aren't mining, they don't let the slaves eat their fill to reduce the risk of riots. I used to agree with this approach, but after experiencing being a slave myself, I realized slaves actually don't have as many thoughts as people assume. Most riots stem from the captain killing people arbitrarily or not providing enough food. We should just give them purified water to drink and let them eat their fill every day. We need to create a difference compared to other trains. The rations for our slaves are equivalent to the thugs on other trains, and the rations for our thugs are equivalent to the captains of other places. When they compare themselves to the outside, a sense of superiority will arise, thereby forming an identification with the train. Step 2. Change the titles. Thugs and slaves are the common terms used by most trains, but those titles themselves are insulting. It's very easy to put the train and the slaves on opposing sides. We protect their safety and provide their daily meals. In the apocalypse, this is clearly a humanitarian act. So why use insulting titles? To be blunt, even in peacetime, a job that covers room and board isn't easy to find, let alone in the apocalypse. We are clearly doing a good thing, so why give ourselves a bad name? Change slaves to passengers and thugs to guards. Just by changing the titles, plus a clear promotion path, whether it's the people here now or those who come later, everyone will have a goal to strive for. Add another carriage so the passengers have enough living space. A standard cargo carriage only costs 100 units of iron ore. Step 3. Recognize their value. Brother Mang must have noticed that after the battle just now, those 10 guards were all very excited. They've already started to identify with the train. It's just weak, because they know you don't care much about their life or death. But if you're willing to guide that emotion, plus my daily propaganda, very soon, everyone will have a strong identification with the train. Lao Zhu spoke in one long breath, his lips slightly pale, his emotions running high, his hands constantly gesturing. Think about it, Brother Mang. When everyone is united towards one goal, the passengers' mining efficiency will be higher. The guards will risk their lives more when facing dangerous battles. Moreover, later on, we might not even need to go catch people. As long as our reputation spreads, many survivors will come looking for us on their own. Of course, the prerequisite for all this is having enough food. In the apocalypse, food is still scarce, so this is just a hypothesis for now. But if Brother Mang thinks it's reasonable, we can absolutely start with the other steps first. When every slave and thug deeply identifies with the train, the chances of betrayal and riots will drop significantly. I narrowed my eyes, sizing Lao Zhu up from head to toe. I had to admit, this guy really had some good ideas. On the outside, he was just an ordinary bald man, but his head wasn't empty. The plan was still rough, but it seemed I was the only one truly qualified to try it. There was one point Lao Zhu was very right about. Why call them slaves? Is mining being a slave? Didn't people have to go to work in peacetime too? Most importantly, this plan might be very difficult for other trains to implement because the crux lies in the amount of food. But this point, for me, is the easiest thing to solve. The moldy bread production line is a white grade attachment. It takes 100 slices of moldy bread to craft. At level 1, it can only produce moldy bread, but what if it's level 10? Wouldn't it produce soft, fragrant bread then? If a survivor in the apocalypse gets to eat that every day, why would they even think about rioting or running away? The food issue, for me, is not an issue at all. If that's the case, then this plan can really be implemented. A moment later, I looked at the 10 people patrolling outside the train, smiled faintly, and said, Lao Zhu, I'll leave this matter to you. I think it's feasible. You don't need to worry about the food issue. I'll figure it out. But there's no need to rush either. Wait until the train's development is more stable, then implement it step by step. Oh right, the train has a name now. It's called the Starfarer. Right now, I need to do something else more important. I have to use the train blade blueprint first. In the apocalypse, the power of unity can only be considered a side dish. The main course is always the strength of the train itself. If a train doesn't have enough offensive and defensive capabilities, no matter how united the people are, it's meaningless. I want to see how the train blade transforms at higher levels. Lao Zhu was anxious when he arrived, but full of excitement when he left. In the control room, I watched his retreating back and shook my head with a helpless smile. I understood very well why he was so happy, partly because he truly wanted the train to develop, hoping for a safe place to survive in the apocalypse. On the other hand, only by planning these things could his value be maximized. If I only focused on fighting and didn't care about management and people, his position would sooner or later be overshadowed. I completely understood. Who doesn't have selfish motives? A person without any selfish motives is probably harboring some crazy thoughts about destroying the world. I was the only one left in the control room. I picked up a pen and notebook on the desk and started scribbling. If you can ram with the train, don't waste ammo. That was the summary of my battle today. Thinking back, when those guys got off the train, I could have just driven the train straight over them. Why waste ammo? But if they had scattered and run back to their locomotive, dealing with them would have been much more troublesome. Thinking like that, what I did just now wasn't entirely wrong. After that, I took the white-grade train blade blueprint out of my pocket. With a thought, 500 units of iron ore in cargo carriage 2 turned into fine powder and melted into the train's body. Immediately after, the entire train trembled slightly. I immediately stepped out of the control room, stood on the wasteland, and looked at the starfarer. I couldn't help but laugh out loud. At the front of the locomotive, and along both sides of the 3 carriages, sharp steel blades simultaneously appeared. They were positioned about a meter above the ground, just right to slice zombies in half. The train blade wrapped around the entire train body, about 10 centimeters wide. The edge wasn't sharpened too much yet. Rubbing it hard with a hand wouldn't even break the skin because the blade was too thick. But once the train started moving, these steel blades were enough to cut any carbon-based life form that got close in half. The width of the train blade was about 30 centimeters, which was also its damage range. Attachment name, train blade. Grade, white. Level, 1. Effect, installs sharp steel blades on both sides of the train carriages, dealing damage to targets that get close while moving. Can be freely retracted. Upgrade requirement, 100 units of iron ore. I was slightly stunned. I originally just intended to check the info first and wait until I had more iron or later to upgrade it. I didn't expect that going from level 1 to level 2 would only require 100 units of iron ore. So what was I waiting for? Upgrade. With this upgrade, the train blade reached level 2. The thickness decreased a bit, the back became sharper, and the width increased by 10 centimeters, reaching 40 centimeters. When the train moves, any creature that gets within 40 centimeters will be slashed to pieces. But right then, a small line of text appeared on the control panel. This vehicle attachment is capped at level 2 and cannot be upgraded further. I didn't believe it. I shook my head, feeling both expectant and experimental, and said in a deep voice, upgrade. However, no changes occurred. Everything remained still, as if this attachment had truly hit its ceiling. I looked down at the birthmark on the back of my hand, then placed my right hand over the birthmark on my left hand, and said in a deep voice again, upgrade. The next moment, Level 0 authority detected. This vehicle attachment can continue to be upgraded. This upgrade consumed 200 units of iron ore. Immediately after, the train blade transformed right before my eyes. The blade became noticeably thinner, and its width continued to increase by another 10 centimeters, reaching 50 centimeters. Awesome. I couldn't help but laugh. This upgrade was mainly to verify the effect of the infinite upgrade plugin. It seems the effect is very solid. The text, Level 0 Authority, appeared on the control panel. I didn't understand its specific meaning, but that didn't matter. Just as Lao Zhu said, the train blade is only a white-grade attachment, mainly used for the transitional phase of beginners. Even if upgraded to a high level, its effect is hard to compare with green-grade offensive attachments. Even at level 3, the increase in power wasn't too obvious, not creating a qualitative change. But the problem is, I don't have a limit. With every upgrade, the blade gets thinner and wider. As long as I have enough iron ore, I can absolutely make a train blade 10 meters wide, like wings hanging on both sides of the train. As long as I step on the gas, anything in front of me can be directly sliced in half. It would even look like it's about to take off. Upgrading without limits also means that if I have enough iron ore, I can strengthen the train blade until it's as thin as a cicada's wing, perhaps even invisible to the naked eye. When that time comes, the ones killed will only know they are dead, without even seeing the murder weapon. Wherever the train passes, not a single blade of grass will grow. No, I need more iron ore. Only then can my grand plan continue. I withdrew my gaze from the train blade and looked at the captain's control panel. Currently, I only have 700 units of iron ore left. I can't bear to keep upgrading the train blade. Within the first 10 levels, the effect increase isn't large enough to create a qualitative change. A slave mining for an hour can gather 1 unit of iron ore. If it's 12 hours a day, that's 12 units. I have 81 slaves, so the maximum daily output is around 972 units. The mining time can't exceed 12 hours, otherwise their bodies won't be able to handle it. More importantly, I can't guarantee there will be a mine to dig every day. The wasteland is full of variables. Currently, I only know of this one mine, and I have absolutely no way to find new ones. The most crucial thing is that my train only came with 1 initial energy stone. 1 energy stone is only enough for the train to run at full speed for 100 hours. To produce energy stones, it is mandatory to upgrade the train to level 2 and craft the crafting table. In other words, if I can't upgrade the train to level 2 within these 100 hours, my train will be completely stranded. I quickly calculated, not counting anything else, just the cost of crafting the necessary attachments and upgrading the train requires about 7,100 units of iron ore, 110 units of copper ore, and 100 units of wood. To be honest, these requirements are not low at all, especially since I'm pressed for time. At least for now, I still don't know where to go to mine copper or in wood. For a new captain, isn't this start a bit too disastrous? I'm also not sure how other captains got through this phase. Out of the 7 essential vehicle attachments to upgrade the train, I've already crafted the generator and the electrical system, but haven't put them to use because I don't have spare energy stones. I tried prying the energy stone from Boss Cohen's train, but it couldn't be removed at all. Clearly, this isn't a detachable attachment. I didn't dare to smash it with a pickaxe either. If it exploded, I'd be dead on the spot. The 5 missing attachments are the water purifier, wind and fire wheels, carriage iron armor, pickaxe production line, and axe production line. I have to quickly upgrade the train to level 2. Otherwise, running out of energy halfway would be a true disaster. Currently, I'm not short on clean water, the iron armor is too expensive, and I've gathered quite a few pickaxes, so I'm not lacking them for the time being. Thus, the most logical choice is to craft the wind and fire wheels to significantly increase the train's speed. When confiscating an enemy train, only certain attachments can be detached, like the cat-mounted heavy machine gun. But most other attachments, like armor or the wind and fire wheels, cannot be removed. Wait a minute. Right at this moment, I suddenly thought of something. I'm not short on pickaxes right now, but would pickaxes produced from an upgraded pickaxe production line mine or faster? I immediately went back to the control room and opened the beginner's guide on the control panel. After scrolling for a while, I finally found the information I needed in a corner. Pickaxe production line. Grade, green. Max level, 3. With each upgrade, the produced pickaxes can mine higher level ores. Only mine higher level ores. I looked at this line of text, frowning slightly. It's not useless, at least for ores level 4 and above later on. I'm afraid I'll be the only one who can mine them smoothly. Even if others get their hands on high-level pickaxes, they might not be able to do what I can. It's just that this result is a bit different from what I thought. There's a slight discrepancy. I'm also not sure if level 4 iron ore can directly replace level 1 iron ore. Very quickly, I found the information I needed in the beginner's guide again. 10 units of level 1 iron ore can be synthesized into 1 unit of level 2 iron ore. 10 units of level 2 iron ore can be synthesized into 1 unit of level 3 iron ore. 10 units of level 3 iron ore can be synthesized into 1 unit of level 4 iron ore. On the crafting table, you can synthesize 10 units of level 1 iron ore into 1 unit of level 2 iron ore, or dismantle 1 unit of level 2 iron ore into 10 units of level 1 iron ore. This time, I smiled in satisfaction. That means as long as I find a level 4 iron mine and upgrade the pickaxe production line to level 4, every unit of level 4 iron ore gathered will be equivalent to 1,000 units of level 1 iron ore. The problem instantly becomes much simpler. Just finding a level 4 iron mine can completely solve my current resource shortage. And finding mines basically relies on two channels. One is asking other captains through the train communicator. The other is relying on the resource radar to detect nearby resource areas while moving. Both of these attachments are only unlocked for crafting after the train is upgraded to level 2. In other words, as long as my train is upgraded to level 2, most of my current difficulties will be solved. After breaking down the problem and analyzing it in detail, I quickly found the optimal plan. The goal became clear. I was no longer like a headless fly, feeling like I lacked everything but not knowing what to prioritize, just standing still. I looked at the 5 attachments required to upgrade the train and finally chose 3: the water purifier, wind and fire wheels, and pickaxe production line. I placed the water purifier in living carriage 3 and the pickaxe production line in warehouse carriage 2. The current carriage layout still isn't perfect, but I don't have extra resources to craft new carriages right now, so I can only accept it as is. Once resources are more abundant later, I'll organize it properly. These 3 attachments cost a total of 700 units of iron ore. I was practically wiped clean. I didn't have a single unit of iron ore left to spare. Producing 1 pickaxe requires 10 units of iron ore, so I can't produce any more for now anyway. The water purifier can filter all kinds of liquids, from urine to rainwater, turning them into drinkable clean water. Its shape is quite ugly, looking a bit like a toilet bowl. When upgraded to level 2, it can even directly produce mineral water. Each bottle of mineral water will consume 1 slice of moldy bread. As for the wind and fire wheels, they automatically replace the standard wheels from before. This attachment can significantly increase the train's speed. However, its drawback is also very obvious. When facing a zombie tide or extremely rough terrain, it's almost impossible to pass through, and the risk of flipping the train is extremely high. At this point, I'm only missing 2 essential attachments to upgrade the train: carriage iron armor and the axe production line. The carriage iron armor is the most expensive, requiring 1,000 units of iron ore. And that's calculated per carriage, meaning 1,000 units of iron ore is only enough to armor 1 carriage. Armoring the entire train would require even more iron ore. Fortunately, just armoring any single carriage is enough to meet the train upgrade requirement. No wonder Boss Kuen's train only had the locomotive armored. In the control room, I looked out the window at the active mine and sighed helplessly. The miners are still working in the mine and can't be pulled out right now. Sometimes I even want to grab a pickaxe and go down to dig myself. I need more people, a lot more. No, I need to fix this habit. According to Lao Zhu, I should call them passengers and survivors. This amount of iron ore is simply not enough. It's a pity the train communicator still doesn't meet the crafting requirements. Otherwise, I'd really like to ask how other captains managed when they lacked resources. Right now, I'm lacking too much information and communication. But right at this moment, I suddenly remembered something. I wonder if my earth core furnace can smelt all those confiscated pistols and pistol ammo. Acting on the thought, I immediately stepped off the train and activated the earth core furnace. The giant, blood-red mouth opened. I threw a pistol in and quickly received 10 units of iron ore. I curled my lip. A bit low, but it's something. Even a mosquito's leg is meat. Then I threw in all the remaining pistols and the over 200 rounds of pistol ammo we confiscated, gaining a total of 250 units of iron ore. The Glock pistol I got at the very beginning was kept, along with over 30 rounds of ammo. Even though I don't use it anymore because I have a better assault rifle, it was my first lifeline in this world. Keeping it as a souvenir is nice. I have to quickly build a train that is safe enough for myself. If I were surrounded by a zombie tide right now, I guess I'd still only be able to detach all the carriages and run for my life. But if the train's strength is high enough, why run? Just crush them all. Who knows, maybe a lot of good stuff would drop. And right at this moment, outside the train, the mercenaries were patrolling. Among them, 3 men gathered in a corner, lowering their voices to discuss something. I had told the 10 of them to choose a leader themselves, and by now they had chosen one. It was the leader of those 3 men. He was a burly, muscular guy with a knife scar on his face, looking like someone you shouldn't mess with. These 3 knew each other from before. They used to be mercenaries on some train. Later, while out gathering supplies, they encountered monsters, fled in panic, and were caught by Boss Kuan, who forced them to be slaves. This time, being chosen by me as mercenaries and having his two old brothers by his side, he naturally became the squad leader of the group. It's just that he was just chosen and hadn't had time to report to me yet. Brother Biao, the skinny, dark guy next to him, glanced at the train, leaned in close, and whispered, "Are we still going to run? This new captain looks even younger than us. Is he reliable?" Initially, the three of them planned to find a chance to escape when Boss Kuan's train reached some city ruins, so they had always kept an extremely low profile. They just didn't expect plans couldn't keep up with changes. Boss Kuan suddenly disappeared, replaced by me, and the three of them were even chosen as mercenaries. Run? The burly man called Brother Biao hesitated slightly. Right now, they were already mercenaries, and he was even a squad leader. To put it bluntly, he was practically the third in command on the train. And they still wanted to run? The whole world has turned into this. Where would they run to? Even if they returned to their old train, he would just be an ordinary mercenary, with no status and no power. That old train had over 30 mercenaries and was a level 2 train, much larger and safer than my train. But there, he was nothing. He used to be a construction foreman, with a bunch of manual labor brothers under him, all of them strong. After the apocalypse broke out, going through a period of panicked fleeing, he luckily obtained a train token and had over 30 people under him. He had ambitions, wanting to build an absolutely safe train himself. The result was that before the initial energy stone ran out, even he himself had to go down to the mine to dig ore. But he still couldn't gather the 7,100 units of iron ore, couldn't upgrade the train to level 2, and couldn't craft the crafting table. In the end, the train was stranded on the wasteland, turning into a pile of scrap iron. Just searching for an iron mine in the vast wasteland had consumed countless amounts of his time. Later he realized that many people who got a train token didn't activate it immediately. Instead, they gathered a team first, waited until they had enough people, and found an iron mine far and remote enough, and only then did they activate the train. They would craft the pickaxe production line, mine ore like crazy, and strive to upgrade the train to level 2 in the shortest time possible. Or they would accumulate resources through trading and plundering. Or someone on another train would abscond with resources, go out to establish themselves, and then he got another train token. This time, he did manage to upgrade to level 2, but during a fight against a zombie tide, they were almost completely wiped out. In the end, only the three of them survived and escaped. From then on, he completely gave up on his dream of being a captain. Not everyone is suited to be a captain. For people like them, the best refuge is probably to follow a strong enough captain and be a mercenary. Later, they also followed a few other captains. The outcome was either being swallowed up or the train being destroyed. Brother Biao frowned, staying silent for a long time. Originally, on Boss Kuan's train, he wanted to run because the treatment for slaves was too poor, with no hope of promotion. He had no chance to interact with the captain or vice captain, and daring to talk to the mercenaries was no different from seeking death. But now it was different. He was already a mercenary captain on my train. To put it bluntly, this was the highest position he had ever reached. If he ran away, at best he would just continue wandering in the ruins, or become a nameless mercenary again. It absolutely couldn't be better than his current situation. Moreover, although I was young, my way of doing things was extremely decisive and steady. From the very beginning in Slave Carriage 7, when I suddenly killed someone, he realized I was the type of person who thought things through clearly. At the time, it just looked like a fight over a straw mat, but it was actually just the starting point. My ambition was big enough. Even as a slave, I had to take the best spot. Realistically speaking, if I hadn't taken that straw mat right from the start, the subsequent events simply wouldn't have happened. Furthermore, Brother Biao looked down at the Tunglong assault rifle in his hands. This thing was absolutely not something a level 1 train could craft. It also wasn't a spoil of war taken from Boss Kuan's train, otherwise it wouldn't have been able to harm Boss Kuan. I had my own fortuitous encounters. On the wasteland, an excellent captain usually only needs to meet one of 3 conditions. First is ability. As long as you're lucky enough, anyone can become a captain. But that doesn't mean the person truly has ability. Brother Biao had seen quite a few captains who lacked the big picture. Some even refused to let women do manual labor, keeping them all as a harem, which made resource gathering pitifully slow, ultimately leading to their own demise. Second is fortuitous encounters. Even if you have no abilities, as long as your fortuitous encounters are great enough, like picking up high-grade vehicle attachment blueprints while walking down the road, even a simple-minded fool can live peacefully for a while. Third is methods. If you have no methods, don't know how to manage people, and don't even realize when people are making up stories about you, then subordinates betraying you or absconding with resources is only a matter of time. Having just one of those 3 points is enough. And Boss Chin Mang seemed to lack none of the 3. Ability goes without saying. Fortuitous encounters were clearly shown by the assault rifle in his hand and the giant, gear-filled mouth at the front of the locomotive. Even if Brother Biao didn't know what attachment that was, its grade definitely wasn't low. As for methods, just looking at how I handled the situation in the slave carriage from the start was enough to know. With someone like that in charge, it's very hard for subordinates to harbor thoughts of betrayal. And even if they did, the sprout would be crushed in the cradle. Analyzing it carefully, Boss Chin Mang was probably the most qualified captain they had ever met. Brother Biao thought for a long time, took a deep breath, and then looked up at the 2 brothers who had followed him all this time. When he saw the look in their eyes clearly, he paused slightly, then couldn't help but laugh and scold. Damn it. You 2 really say one thing, but mean another. These 2 were asking if they should run, but their eyes clearly showed they didn't want to. Obviously, they also felt that following me wasn't a bad choice. Hee. The skinny, dark guy hugged the assault rifle in his arms tightly, smiling obsequiously. Brother Biao, look at this. This is an automatic assault rifle. Before, we only had pistols. Every time we went out to gather supplies or catch people, we had to prepare an escape route. Now with this thing in hand, even if we run into 18 zombies, there's nothing to be afraid of. In this apocalypse, what does everyone want? Isn't it just a sense of security and a better life? With this gun, that sense of security has visibly increased. But don't worry, as long as you say run, the 2 of us will still follow you. Brother Biao put on a serious face, took a deep breath, and said decisively, if everyone is in agreement, then we're not running. Just stay put and work for Boss Chin Mang. With Boss Chin Mang's methods and fortuitous encounters, who knows, we might even have a chance to upgrade the train to level 3 later on. Besides, there are nearly 100 laborers here. You all know how fast resource gathering is with that many people right from the start. Nearly 1,000 units of iron ore a day, we can't even use it all. Speaking of this, Brother Biao's voice suddenly deepened. But from now on, everyone must listen to me. Words like what you just said, it's best to say them less. No one likes their subordinates forming cliques, right? I will definitely cover for you too, but normally when you speak, use your brains a little. Don't always stick by my side, lest others misunderstand that you 2 only listen to me and no one else. Especially, when Boss Chin Mang gives you 2 a task, absolutely do not turn your heads to look at me. Understood? Mentioning this made Brother Biao annoyed again. On the previous train, the reason he was ostracized was because when the 3 of them first joined, the vice captain gave Hei-Wa a task. Hei-Wa stood completely still at the time, only turning his head to look at him, as if waiting for him to nod in permission. At that moment, his heart sank straight to the bottom. Sure enough, the vice captain didn't say anything at the time, but later on, all the most dangerous tasks were dumped on his head. If he didn't have some skills to keep himself alive, the grass on his grave would have been taller than a person long ago. If he didn't know Hei-Wa didn't do it on purpose, he really would have wanted to kill someone. This was no different from deliberately pushing him out to be cannon fodder. Understood. Hei-Wa lowered his head, stammering in embarrassment. I didn't think that much at the time. I was just in an unfamiliar environment and afraid of making a mistake, so I wanted you to help me check. It definitely won't be like that this time. After making the decision, Brother Biao patrolled much more seriously, because he wasn't just risking his life for me, but also for himself. Once he slacked off on his duty, by the time they noticed, the zombies would have already formed an encirclement. At that time, not only would I die, but he wouldn't survive either. On the wasteland, the entire train is a community of shared interests. Any negligence by an individual can push the whole train into danger. At the same time, he was thinking about another matter in his head. He had just been promoted and hadn't gone to report to me yet. Once he decided to seriously follow Boss Chin Meng, how to make me truly trust him was a problem he had to consider carefully. What if? He tilted his head slightly, glancing at a mercenary standing not far away who was glaring at him with dissatisfaction. This guy had just failed in the competition for the squad leader position and was clearly very unresigned. If he could find a way to instigate that person to rebel and then immediately crush him, couldn't he step on that person's corpse to climb to a higher position? But as soon as that thought flashed, he shook his head and dismissed it. Too dangerous. One wrong step, and he would die along with him. He sighed softly, turning his head to look at the train behind him. In his heart, he only hoped I could quickly upgrade the train to level 2. After all, a level 1 train has absolutely no offensive attachments, and the sense of security is still too weak. Even though he had decided to follow me, this level 1 train still made it hard for people to feel at ease. Currently, the only combat attachments were that heavy machine gun and the train blade. He knew about the train blade. He used to have this white grade attachment and upgraded it to level 2, but the effect was very limited, only enough to deal with small-scale zombie tides. Thinking of this, Brother Biao suddenly froze a bit. He didn't know if it was an illusion, but he felt the train blade on this train looked thinner and the blade surface wider than the train blade on his old train. He quickly shook his head, not thinking about it anymore. Maybe he just remembered it wrong. After all, crafting the white-grade train blade was from the early stages of the apocalypse. Faded memories are normal. In the control cabin, I looked out the window, then glanced at the wall clock in the control room. It was already 10 at night. I could let the slaves board the train to rest, get some sleep, and continue mining tomorrow morning. It was also at this time, through the beginner's guide, that I learned the resources in each mine are limited. When the resources are mined out, it takes a few days for the mine to recover. I had gone down to the mine to check. According to estimates, this mine is enough for me to exploit for 10 days to half a month under ideal conditions. Of course, ideal conditions mean no one comes to disturb us during that time. But obviously, this is unrealistic. It's very possible that tomorrow morning zombies will appear, or another train will come to fight for this mine. If the train's firepower is strong enough, I wouldn't need to care, but right now, I looked at the control panel in front of me, falling into deep thought. About a few dozen minutes later, the slaves returned from the mine one after another. They received their food and water rations, then orderly returned to the slave carriage to rest. At the same time, all the mined iron ore was handed in. Added to the 250 units of iron ore I already had, it totaled exactly 700 units. Getting this result from half a day of mining was already very good. Looking at their demeanor, everyone seemed hard-working, like it was their first day on the job, trying their best to show off. When all the iron ore was loaded into cargo carriage 2, I looked at the control panel displaying 800 units of iron ore and nodded in satisfaction. I originally intended to keep this iron ore untouched and use it all for upgrading the train to level 2. But right at that moment, I suddenly saw a line of information in the beginner's guide. The beginner's guide is a red button on the control panel. When pressed, the screen in the control room displays basic information to help new captains not get confused. That line of information stated, all vehicle attachments, upon upgrading to level 5, will unlock their first limit break effect. I froze slightly. The higher the grade of the attachment, the higher the upgrade limit. But most white grade attachments, green grade attachments can't even reach level 5, so this information is practically useless in the short term. But the problem is, I have the infinite upgrade plugin. If a white grade attachment is upgraded to level 5 by me, will it trigger a limit break effect? This was completely unanswered. I quickly calculated. The white grade train blade is currently at level 3. From level 1 to level 2 took 100 iron ore. From level 2 to level 3 took 200 iron ore. Following that increment, reaching level 5 would require a total of 700 units of iron ore. And right now, I happen to have exactly 700. If I try it, I'll have to delay upgrading the train to level 2 by a day. But if I don't try it, I definitely won't be able to sleep tonight, tossing and turning. I calmly looked at the line of information in the beginner's guide. I understood very well that on the path forward, temptations always appear. I had just made up my mind to use all the iron ore to upgrade the train, and temptation arrived right before my eyes. But who could resist? Even though upgrading the train to level 2 is extremely important, if the train blade reaching level 5 really unlocks a limit break effect, then this attachment will likely be significantly stronger, becoming a reliable offensive weapon. Plus, this test will directly affect how I allocate resources in the future. After a brief moment of hesitation, I quickly made my decision. Out here in this dangerous wasteland, a powerful offensive attachment takes priority. Even if a white tier attachment doesn't have a limit-breaking effect, a level 5 vehicle blade is still a highly valuable offensive weapon. Upgrade. Upgrading the white tier vehicle attachment, vehicle blade, to level 5. The next moment, 700 units of iron ore stored in cargo car number 2 instantly turned into fine powder, completely dissolving into the train structure. I immediately stepped out of the cabin and looked at the vehicle blades on both sides of the hull. At first glance, the most obvious change was that the blades were thinner and much wider. The width had increased from a mere 5 mm to a full 70 cm, significantly expanding their attack range. Additionally, 2 small lines of text appeared on the control panel for the white tier vehicle blade. Level 5 limit breaking effect. The vehicle blade can now rotate at high speeds. Note: upgrading this attachment to level 10 will unlock a second limit breaking effect. High-speed rotation. I stared at the text. This was the very first limit breaking effect I had ever acquired. I nodded, deep in thought. At the same time, I could feel it deep within my consciousness. A brand new button had appeared on the cabin's control panel. Instinctively, I pressed it. Instantly, the blades on both sides of the Stellar Express began spinning around the train at blinding speeds, emitting an ear-piercing screech as they sliced through the air. Whoa! I stood frozen, staring at the scene before me. A few seconds later, I couldn't stop the smirk from spreading across my face. The blades had become a spinning ring of death hugging the hull. This meant that even if the train was completely stationary, this attachment could still dish out a massive amount of damage. If the train was moving, the destructive power would be absolutely terrifying. If I upgraded the wheel system later to ensure stable movement across harsh terrain without worrying about flipping or getting stuck, then no matter how many zombies swarmed us, it would be like slicing through butter. I wouldn't have to worry about zombie tides ever again. Those 700 units of iron ore were definitely not wasted. The results far exceeded my expectations. Once the test was over, I stopped the blades and retracted them back into the hull. I had no idea how blades that wide managed to fold into the train, but that didn't matter. This was perfect. With everything sorted, I headed back to the cabin to get some rest. The steel door could only be opened with my permission, making this place theoretically impenetrable. Of course, if we ran into a threat capable of destroying the entire train, hiding in the cabin wouldn't mean a damn thing. Outside in the wasteland, Biao Gu was just about to report to the vice captain when he witnessed the whole spectacle. He stood there, frozen and expressionless for a long time before finally looking away. If he had doubted his own memory before, he was now absolutely certain of one thing. Boss Mang's vehicle blade and the one he had crafted were absolutely not the same thing. At the very least, his version didn't have blades this thin, a surface this wide, and it certainly couldn't spin. Spinning blades. The destructive power was on a completely different level. Just then, Hua came running over, panting as he reported that today was the first time the slaves had been sent down into the mines. Since the workflow wasn't fully set up yet, they hadn't been able to track exactly how much each person mined. However, 4 or 5 slaves had complained that 2 women spent the entire shift just standing around chatting. They hadn't mined a single piece of, but still received the same food rations as everyone else, which sparked outrage. Those 2 women were Boss Kuen's former wives. They had been hiding in the front car and were only sent down to the mines after the battle ended. To make matters worse, they had been loudly proclaiming that they wanted to be my women. They demanded to see me immediately, even threatening the others that if anyone got in their way, they'd pay for it later. Hearing this, Biao Gu immediately decided to take the 2 women to the vice captain. He knew very well that these 2 women were quite attractive and had great figures, a rare commodity in the apocalypse. If this wasn't handled carefully, it could easily cause trouble down the line. Over in living car number 3, Lao Zhu was busy organizing the workflow. Seeing Biao Gu approach with 2 arrogant-looking women in tow, he immediately went on high alert. Not daring to waste any time, He grabbed a few men and escorted them along the hull to the connection between cargo car number 2 and the front engine. Lao Zhu knocked on the steel door, calling out softly that there was an issue that needed my attention. The door slid open. I had just been getting ready for bed, only to find a group of people standing right outside. After listening to Biao Gu recount the entire situation, my expression darkened. I glared at the two women standing in the back, my voice dropping to an icy chill. So what you're telling me is, you two spent the entire afternoon down there and didn't mine a single piece of ore?